Chapter 1. The Waking. I'm sitting in front of a man at a desk. I look around and see that the desk is sitting alone in a spotlight surrounded by darkness. The man is wearing a fine suit, the kind those rich people wear as they walk past me while I beg for change on the street, the kind that the people who were never hungry in their lives wore. "Hello?" the man said calmly. "Hi," I reply. "I have no idea where I am." "What do you last remember?" the man asked. "I was sleeping. It was cold, so cold I thought I was going to die," I reply. "Well, you did, I'm afraid," the man said with a sigh. "What?" I asked in shock. "Yes, you are dead, I'm afraid. I apologize for all the grievances in your past life. Many of the worlds are in a sorry state at the moment. The backlog of reincarnations we have to process is quite significant. We simply don't have the resources to maintain a suitable quality of life for all the souls under our care," the man said, looking quite defeated. "So, what happens now? Do I go to heaven?" I ask, slightly hopeful at the idea. Finally, I won't have to be so hungry that my stomach feels like just a dull ache in my belly. I won't have to worry about freezing to death in the winter, getting robbed, getting stabbed. Unfortunately, the Christians got it wrong, my dear boy. There is no heaven. Although I am quite sure you aren't that familiar with the various religious beliefs of the world, seeing as you were 12 years old when you expired, the man said as he looked down at a file in his hand. "Expired? Like food becoming expired?" I ask. "When you died, my dear boy. The Buddhists got it right, actually. Or at least they were the closest. Does the word reincarnation ring any bells?" the man asked. It means we get reborn into another life," I say as I feel my heart drop. "I may have to suffer through all that I went through all over again." "Well, if you are worrying that you'll end up in your past life circumstances, don't worry. Your age at the time of your death, plus the pain and suffering you suffered, makes you eligible for one of our compensation packages," the man said as he reached under his desk and pulled out a thick file. "So according to this, you are eligible for the highest grade of compensation, which entitles you to keeping your memories, if you so desire, a Class A1 power level body, and a Section B33 question preference assessment by the assessing executive. That's me, by the way. So yeah, your next life will be pretty good relative to your previous one," the man said as he read off a page in the file. "Oh, so I can be born rich?" I asked, perking up at those words. "Well, you could technically, but that would be taking a worse deal, honestly. Your entitlements from this compensation package afford you a higher existence than the kind that would require currency to obtain what you desire," the man replied. "Oh, so I won't be human?" I ask. "Well, you can be, but we can offer you something better. In truth, not many souls get this package. You only got this because your past 2 lives were terrible. You see, if someone lives to between age 10 to 15 and suffers through most of it in 3 separate lives, only then would you be eligible for this package. Furthermore, packages only apply on the 3rd life onwards, so, yeah, you got really unlucky 3 times in a row," the man said with a sigh. "Oh," I reply at a loss of what to say. "Okay, basically, I'll ask you 3 questions and I will decide what your next life will be. You will be powerful enough to make your life whatever you want within your existence. Plus, you can keep your memories if you want." "So shall I begin asking the questions?" the man said, as he put the file away and pulled out a pen and paper. "Okay," I reply hesitantly. "What is your favorite thing to do?" the man asked. "Eat," I replied, thinking of that time a nice woman bought me a slice of pizza. "Okay, consuming sustenance. What would you say is your strategy when you encounter problems in life?" the man asked. Well, I just try to adjust to the situation and hopefully it doesn't kill me," I reply, thinking of all the times I had to think of strange and odd solutions to my problems. "Okay, adaptive. Then what would you say is your greatest strength?" the man asked. "I don't like to run from my problems because they always find you eventually. Best to solve them as soon as possible. Even if sometimes that takes a long time," I reply. "Okay, tries to overcome presented crises as much as possible. All right, that's about it. I think I have the perfect fit for you. So do you want to keep your memories?" the man asked. "Yeah, I think so. It would be waste to forget all the lessons I learned." I reply as I remember all the hard lessons I learned in my past life. I would rather not make those mistakes again. All right, so do you have any final questions before I send you on your way? The man asked. Yeah, what will I be when I reincarnate? I ask. Oh, I can't tell you that. I can assure you your life will be much better than the previous one. The policy prevents me from disclosing details about the specifics of your next life. But I can tell you that you won't be human, the man said. So I'll be something better, I ask. Yeah, definitely. Humans are a Class C7 body-type creature. You will be a Class A1 body-type creature. So yes, it's much better, the man said. Okay, I guess I'm ready, I say as I tense, silently praying the reincarnation process won't hurt. Excellent, the man said. The moment the man said that word, the world went black. I tried to get my bearings, but I found I couldn't move. It feels like I'm curled up in a fetal position. This place felt warm and wet. Oh God. I hope I'm not about to be born. What with this egg? I hear a muffled male voice say. No idea. Hey Elisa, you said this tomb had some good stuff here. Why is there only this weird egg? I hear another male voice ask. I don't know. This map was passed down from my family. I only recently figured out where it led to. Judging by the seal on the door, this place has been sealed for centuries. Everything looks undisturbed as well, a female voice said, sounding very confused. You think this egg is valuable? I mean, it's quite big, one of the voices said as I felt something tap onto a surface above me. Oh my God. I'm in an egg. Am I a bird? Am I going to be some weird pigeon or something? Hang on, what does this say? I heard another female voice say. Then I feel the area around me shift, and I feel this strange pressure around me lessen. Whoa, whoa, it's hatching, I hear the first male voice say. Oh gods. I hear one for the female voices say in horror. Then I feel the shell give way, and I feel my body instinctively thrash, and I feel the shell start to break around me. Darkness gave way to light, and I landed onto what feels like a stone floor. We need to leave, now, I hear a female voice shout in fear. What? What is it? I look up just in time to see a man in armor say. He's wearing what looks to be leather armor, and he had a simple sword strapped to his belt. He looked to be about in his early 20s. It's a Devourer, we need to run now, the female voice said. I turned to see a woman standing in front of a stone tablet as she gazed at me in horror. We can't just run, what if it gets out? The ones in the stories are the size of cities. This one is smaller than a dog. We should kill it while it's small. If it gets out and starts growing, it'll wipe Avalon off the face of the world. I hear the man in front of me shout, We're Iron Rank adventurers. There's no way we can kill a Devourer. I heard another male voice shout. I turn to voice and see him wearing lighter armor and looks to be holding a pair of daggers in his hand. It was then that I noticed that my vision was strange. The colors seemed to be duller, and I could see their hearts glowing red and pulsating in their chests. As I looked at those glowing red orbs, I started to feel hungry. Then hit it and see what happens. I heard the woman standing next to the tablet shout in panic. I feel my blood turn cold, and I turn back to see the man had drawn his sword. He raised it over his head and was about to swing right at me. Then time seemed to slow, and I found myself easily able to dart to the left, dodging strike. It's fast, I heard a woman say, and I turned to see her with a bow drawn and aimed right at me. When the arrow flew at me, time seemed to slow again, and I easily dodged the arrow. Wait, stop, I shout at the group. Instantly I saw all of them cover their ears as their faces scrunched up in pain. Fuck, kill it, I heard the man with the daggers shout. I continued to dodge their attacks. It wasn't that difficult. I was fast, much faster than them. But as I dodged, I started to get more and more hungry. I looked for an exit and saw a doorway, but the stone door seemed to be shut. Well, maybe I could open it. I darted along the ceiling, my strange body easily moving along the inverted surface. I didn't seem to be slowed by gravity at all. When I arrived at the door, I scrambled along it trying to find a way to open, but I didn't see a doorknob or anything. Just this large glowing rune in the middle where the two doors met. It was then that I noticed that they weren't attacking me anymore. I turned my head and saw all of them, their faces as pale as parchment. They were looking on in horror at the sealed door. The door's sealed, one of the women whispered in horror. By this point, I was getting really hungry, and as I looked at the glowing shapes of their hearts, I could feel myself start to drool. Well, I'm hungry. Food's right there. I hurl myself at the nearest one of the four in the room, the one with the daggers. I extend my arms and tear at his chest. His armor is cut to pieces like paper, and soon I find flesh. I feel his body topple over backwards as he screams. I begin tearing into his chest, removing all the pesky obstacles in the way. His flesh, the ribs, and finally I see it. That pulsating red fruit, when I smelt the aroma of his heart, I couldn't resist anymore, and I thrust my head towards it, biting down hard onto that delicious-looking organ. I felt the man's body twitch as I took my first mouthful of this heart. It was the most delicious thing I have ever tasted. It tasted like honey, and I ate every bite as fast as I could. When I finished, I felt my body change, and I heard a voice in my head. New essence acquired. Type, human. Insufficient essence for assimilation. I felt my body seem to shift and change. It was an odd feeling, but it felt quite pleasant. Then, as quickly as it began, it ended. As it ended, I turned to look at the 3 remaining people trapped in here with me. Oh gods, it grew, one of the women said as her whole body trembled. As I rear up, I realize I'm now as tall as them. Previously, I was only about half their height. That's quite a growth spurt. I'm still hungry, though. With the hunger still on my mind, I hurl myself at the man with the sword, and soon I find myself staring at his beating heart. I once again plunge my head towards it and savor its delectable taste on my palate. Again I hear a voice in my head. Human essence acquired. Insufficient essence for assimilation, so I get essence whenever I eat one of their hearts. Well, there's still 2 of them left, and I'm still hungry. The 2 remaining women are now in tears and are huddled together in the corner of the room. I think I'll take the one who had the bow first. They screamed as I shot towards them. I could hear the other woman screaming and sobbing as I tore into the woman I chose. Soon another heart was in my belly, and I felt my hunger start to ease. Still not enough essence for assimilation. As I turned to the last woman who was now on her knees with her hands clasped in prayer. Divine, forgive my transgressions. Deliver me from darkness. 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 She prayed in blind panic, her eyes wide in terror as she looked down at the mangled corpse of the woman I just dined on. Well, this one wasn't going anywhere, no need to rush. So I reach out and grab her by the front of her clothes, and she screams in blinding terror. I don't want to die. She screams as she sobs. Her words give me pause as it starts to sink in. I just killed these people. I know it's wrong, yet it doesn't feel wrong. I know it should feel wrong. Odd. I wonder even if I kill her, I would still be stuck in this room. She was the one who could read that tablet. I may be able to use her to get out. So I drag her up, and I realize I'm now probably 2.5 meters tall. I pulled her kicking and screaming all the way back to the tablet, and I raised her up. I shove her face towards the tablet. What does it say? I ask. The woman screams as she covers her ears. I guess she can't understand me. I let her go and point at the tablet. Her crying subsided for a moment as she looked at my extended hand and at the tablet. It was then that I noticed my hand was a pale white, and it had 3 fingers each tipped with a large black talon. I looked down and see the lower half of my body was like a snake with no legs to speak of. That was also when I noticed I actually had 4 arms, all with 3 taloned fingers. The woman looks back at me tearfully, and I point at the tablet again. So she shakily looks down at the tablet and begins to read. Within this tomb lies our greatest treasure, a child of primordial powers that will one day awaken. For this tomb holds the cradle of a primordial devourer, the ultimate apex predator, eater of heroes and gods. One day the child will awaken and feast upon the flesh of lesser creatures. This tomb will seal itself until the day a suitable sacrifice arrives. The woman faltered as she began to sob, and her head dropped. I was starting to feel impatient, so I reached out and grabbed her by the back of her neck and shoved her head towards the tablet. As she choked on her sobs, she finished reading the tablet. Once the sacrifice is complete, the seals of this tomb shall open, releasing the child to the world. The child will remind the world of the truth that they have tried to so hard to forget. The true nature of life: eat or be eaten, kill or be killed, consume, adapt, overcome. For this is life's great imperative. Many will say this child is a living nightmare, but this child is no dream. This child is the waking. Chapter 2. The Wide World. I sat on the ground as I quietly munched on the last remaining bit of meat from those humans. It turns out I could get more essence from their meat as well, but it seems most of the essence was concentrated at the heart. Still, you should never waste food. As I ate, I pondered my apparent numbness to the idea of killing and eating human flesh. I remember I used to think it's a bad thing, but now it just seems like nothing. I tried thinking of their families and the inevitable grieving that will take place when their disappearance is noted. However, somehow I just couldn't make myself care. Yeah, they were dead, but they tasted good and I was hungry. Somehow that was a good enough justification in my mind. I suspect it's something to do with my new body. I would assume my new brain worked differently from the human brain. That might explain why I seem to have lost all my revulsion for killing and bloodshed. Well, that was a problem for later. For now, how the hell do I get out of this place? I ponder this next question just as I swallow the last bit of human flesh. The moment I swallowed, I heard the voice in my head again. Human genome assimilation complete. Achieved human genome level 110. Advanced cognition improved. Color perception improved. Fine motor skills improved. Auditory communication improved. Advanced cognition? Does that mean I can now feel bad about what I just did? I try to make myself feel bad again. And, nope, still don't care. Maybe this means I can do math better or something. As for the rest, well, the world does seem slightly more colorful than before, and as I move the fingers on my hand, I find I can control them a little better. Hello, I say out loud, and I hear a garbled, crude hello sound out. Well, it's better than the screeching noise I was making previously. At least now I can attempt to communicate with another person if they decide they want to kill me. Then I hear the sound of stone grinding, and I see the stone door in front me start to open. Well, that's one problem solved. Let's go see what's out there. I raised myself back up and I moved out the door. I am much faster now compared to when I was a human. I'm not even trying to move fast, and it looks like I'm moving about as fast as a bicycle. When I exit the cave, I find myself in a calm forest. I could hear the trees rustling and birds singing. I notice I can smell something peculiar in front of me. I try to pinpoint it, and before my eyes a glowing trail appeared. It led into the forest, and as I looked around I saw the trail led into the cave behind me as well. I'm guessing this is the smell of those 4 humans. Should I follow it? I mean, the past 4 were far weaker than me, but then again they said they were iron-ranked adventurers. I'm not sure how strong iron rank is, but I guess I could look around and see what I find. So with that thought in mind, I followed the trail, and I soon found myself at the edge of the forest. I had just torn through the forest, my body easily able to navigate around the trees. The terrain proved to be no hindrance to me. Then I felt a chill in my bones, and I instinctively knew danger was near. I clambered up a tree and faced where I sensed the danger was coming from. I saw a group of 6 humans moving along the road. They were wearing fine armor, and I could see they were much better equipped than the 4 I just killed. I knew in my gut I couldn't beat them if we fought, so I just watched as they moved past. We're finally at gold rank. I wonder what's all the fuss about gold rank quests being significantly harder than silver rank quests. I heard one of them say, "Well, this is our first gold rank quest. I guess we'll find out." Another one of the humans replied, "The pay is so much higher, I can't wait to upgrade my equipment," another one said. I eavesdropped on their conversation as they walked past me and down the road, none the wiser to my presence. So it seems I can't fight gold-ranked adventurers yet. I think it's best I avoid human civilization for now. Once they were out of sight, I clambered down the tree and began heading deeper into the forest. I didn't have to travel long before I ran into another living creature. I turned to see a strange lizard suddenly freeze when I flew past it. It freezed, and its form seemed to disappear before my eyes, but soon a glowing red silhouette appeared. It looks like this one can go invisible. I could use some invisibility. In a flash, I was on top of it, and I brought my claws right onto its head. I could tell this one wasn't a match for me, and sure enough, I splattered its head into the ground with the force of my swing. Once again, my senses are assaulted by the sweet aroma of the corpse, so I greedily dug into my latest kill. I went for the heart first, and like before, it was delicious. New essence acquired. Type, Stalker Chameleon. Insufficient essence for assimilation. As I expected, there wasn't enough essence from one of these. If there's one here, I can bet there's more in this forest. I sniffed at the blood left on the ground and I caught its scent. I looked around and saw a trail. I'm not sure if I'll find any more by following this trail, but it's better than hurtling blindly through this forest. I followed the trail for a period of time, and I started to sense the trail was getting thicker and thicker. I eventually arrived at the mouth of a cave. From what I could tell, this cave was practically bathed in the scent. I sensed no danger, so I decided to enter to have a look. I got a meter into the cave and immediately met another one that was attempting to leave the cave. It froze and went invisible. Well, it didn't work for the other one, and it's definitely not going to work for this one. This time I just lunged at it and tore its head off with my teeth. The Stalker Chameleon didn't even have time to cry out as I removed its head from its body. Again, I gorged myself on the body, not wasting a single bit of flesh. It seemed like this hunger in my belly was almost insatiable. It didn't bother me, it was more like a mild hunger that one would feel when you want a snack. As I finished up, I heard some strange screeching coming from inside the cave. The screeching was then echoed by several others. I think I may have found a nest. Lucky me. These lizards were strange. They had these scythe-like appendages growing out of their backs. I assumed these were for combat, but I think the lizards could tell I'm much stronger than they were, so they opted to hide. Well, their weakness is a good thing. I really wanted that invisibility ability. I'm not sure how I know that eating them will give me their abilities, but I just do. It's something like common sense to me. I guess it's what most people would call instinct. Well, I'll find out if my instincts are right once I clear this place out. As I continued down the tunnel, I ran into a pair of them. This time they hissed and lunged at me. I guess they realized that I could see them. Well, to me, they might as well be moving in slow motion. I slashed one and bit down hard on the other. In that one moment, they were both dead. After I ate these two, I heard the voice in my head again. Stalker Chameleon assimilation complete. Achieved Stalker genome, level 110. Invisibility acquired. Arm blades acquired. Thermal vision improved. With that, I felt something in my body change. I looked down at my hands, and I felt like I could change them somehow. I ran the thought through my mind, and I saw my hand transform into a scythe-like blade. My top two arms now looked like the kind of hands a praying mantis would have. This was surprisingly easy. It seems my body instinctively knew what to do. So bearing that in mind, what about invisibility? Before my eyes, I saw my hands disappear, and my vision switched so I could see a glowing silhouette of my arms. Well, this silhouette would make it easier for me. I can imagine how confusing it would be to try and use my limbs when I couldn't see them. All right then, let's try these new toys out. I hurtled down the tunnel and I realized the stalkers couldn't see me. I was quite surprised at that fact. I did get the improved thermal vision, so I assumed they would be able to see me. Maybe my body didn't give off any heat. Well, regardless, this made my job easier. I was able to cut down a stalker with a single swing from one of the arm blades. I decided to clear out the cave before eating any of them. I don't want any to escape. With me moving at top speed, I had the cave cleared out within 15 minutes, which left me with a haul of 10 more corpses to eat, and about 24 of their eggs. By the end of my feast, I was at Stalker Genome Level 3, and my arm blades were much stronger than before. I slashed at the rock wall I found I could easily carve right through it. Well, this is certainly going to be useful. Still, I wasn't full. I could still feel that slight hunger in my belly. I guess trying to remove my hunger would be a pointless task. As I moved to leave, I realized a problem. I'm too big to enter the passageway that leads out of the cave. If only I were a bit smaller. As that thought ran through my mind, I felt my body change, and as I looked down, I realized my body just shrunk down. Well, this is awfully convenient. I wonder how small I can go. I tried to shrink my body to the size I was when I first hatched. But I found I couldn't. I could only get down to the size of a man. Previously, after eating all the stalkers, my body was almost 4 meters tall. Now I'm around 2 meters tall. So I guess there is a limit to how much I can shrink. I think I'll stay as small as possible for now. Best to keep a low profile. With that, I activated my invisibility and exited the cave. As soon as I left, I heard the faint sound of screaming. It sounded like a girl's voice. It was coming from the road. Should I check it out? I mean, if I run into some powerful humans, I might just get cut down. I never got a good look at myself in a mirror, but judging from the reactions of the first humans I met, I'm not exactly a cute-looking creature. Still, I don't think humans are that strong overall. Those humans in the tomb looked quite fit, all things considered. Then I heard the scream again. The girl was clearly terrified. I wonder if she is getting attacked by something. Well, I could just go have a look with my invisibility, and if things don't look good, I could always just flee. I mean, I'm really fast. I'm pretty sure your average human can't catch me. All right, fine, let's do this. I checked to make sure my invisibility was still on and ran or perhaps slithered at full speed towards the road. As I made my way to the road, I realized that even at full speed I was quite silent. Somehow my body automatically moved in such a way that minimized noise. There was still the sound of leaves being ruffled, but it wasn't loud by any means. Then I reached the road and I saw what was causing all the commotion. I saw a wagon with the horses pulling them all dead in the dirt. I wonder what horse tastes like. Okay, no. Getting distracted. Anyway, as I surveyed the rest of the surroundings, I saw a dead man lying in the dirt. He was rather plump, and judging by his clothes, he seemed rather well off. I mean, I could see his clothes had some fancy patterns sewn in. Not sure if that's normal fashion, but he definitely dressed better than me in past life. On the sides, I could see 2 men laughing. They were wearing a random assortment of armor, and I could see crude weapons in their hands. The girl's screaming was coming from the other side of the wagon. Well, I'm already here, and might as well have a better look. Judging by what I can sense, those 2 armed men pose no threat to me. With that thought in mind, I circled around the wagon, and I saw a young woman. She looked to be about in her early 20s. The men had her pinned on the floor, and one of them was cutting her clothes off. I know where this is going. In the back of mind, I felt a little bad for the woman. I definitely don't feel as horrified as I should. It was more like I was viewing a mildly unfortunate set of circumstances, like if someone fell down in the snow or dropped their food or something. These men were probably bandits or something. Is that what these types of people are called? Back in my past life, people called these types of people thugs and thieves. If I recall, bandits were like roving bands of thieves and murderers back in those medieval times. You know what, I'm just going to call them bandits. Anyway, these bandits looked weak too. I could probably take them all by myself. Well, rape is bad and I am hungry. Okay, as far as I know, I'm always hungry. But the point still stands. Rape is bad, me hungry. Well, technically they were going to rape her. They aren't raping her at this moment. They were still cutting her clothes off. Oh well, might as well eat the bandits. Maybe the woman will actually talk to me if I save her. She might even have a mirror so I can get a good look at myself. Girls like mirrors, right? With that thought in mind, I creeped up behind the man that was positioning himself between the woman's legs as he fumbled with his pants. He had no idea I had already opened my mouth and was itching to bite his head off. Then in a flash, I bit down hard on his head, and I felt his skull cave like a melon. I ripped his head clean off his shoulders. The moment I did, I sensed my invisibility fade, so it looks like my invisibility only persists until I attack someone. The men around all screamed in shock as they saw their fellow's head being removed from his body. I grabbed the headless body and tossed it towards the side against the carriage with enough force to break one of the wheels. I'll eat the rest later. Eat once the meal is prepared, but it's okay to taste test. The rest of the men all shouted as they drew their weapons. "What the hell is that?" I heard one of them shout. "I don't know, kill it," another screamed in reply. One of the men shot an arrow at me. The arrow hit me in the face and it bounced off like it hit a brick wall. "Oh shit," one of the men said as he saw the arrow deflect easily off my skin. I leapt towards the nearest man, all my arms now transformed into bone blades, and I easily hacked him in half at the waist. There was little to no resistance from his armor and flesh. I might as well be cutting air. I felt another arrow bounce off my back, and I turned to look at the archer. I saw his eyes widen in fear as he realized he was next. In a flash, I buried one of my blades in his chest, while being careful not to damage that beautiful red fruit in the middle of his chest. As I tore my blade free to a spray of that red nectar, I sensed an attack coming. I instinctively dodged off to the side, and I felt the sword cut the air behind me. My posture was a bit awkward for me to use my blades. Let me try something. I turned my body and used my snake-like tail to strike the man. As soon as my tail hit him in the left ribs, I felt the bones shatter, and as I turned back around, I saw the man flying back as he spewed blood from his mouth. He landed in the dirt, scrabbling at his chest, as he gasped and choked on the blood bubbling out from his mouth. I think I probably broke half his ribs and probably liquefied some of his organs. On closer inspection, I saw the side of his chest that I had hit was caved in. Well, he's dead. Now then, 2 more. When I looked at the 2 remaining men, I saw that they were bolting down the road with their weapons lying in the dirt nearby. So trying to run, I saw one of them turn his head to look at me, and as I activated my invisibility, I saw his eyes widen in fear as my form vanished. He let out a scream as he tried to run even faster. Sadly for him, I caught up to them in just a few seconds. I decided to go for the other one first, since he was slower. I opened my jaw and bit down hard on his right shoulder and ripped the shoulder, some of his ribs and his arm clean off his body. The body fell as I snapped up the little snack and swallowed it greedily, enjoying the taste and crunchiness of the bones. As for the final one, I caught him a few seconds after beginning the chase. For this one, I decided to have a little fun. I grabbed him by the back of his clothes and lifted him off the ground after transforming to my full size. When I turned him around, he screamed when he realized I was now much larger than before. His feet were dangling almost a meter off the floor as he kicked and thrashed trying to escape. I could sense his fear, and I must admit that fear was delicious. It only added to my hunger. It was almost like seasoning on food. "Good try," I say, and I see his eyes widen as he realized I could speak. "Please let me go. I promise I won't kill any more. I'm sorry." The man wept as he continued to struggle. "You think I'm here because you're attacking that woman?" "No, I'm here because I'm hungry," I say with a small laugh as I use one of my hands to grab him by the chest to stop him from struggling. "You know what's the best thing about meals that run?" I ask, and the man, now frozen in fear, looks at me with sheer terror in his eyes. It makes it more fun. Chapter 3. The Buffet. "Don't move. You can't escape even if you tried. I can smell you from a mile away, and I can outpace you on any terrain," I say to the woman as I slither up to her. She mutely nods as she shakes in abject terror. I smelled the distinct scent of ammonia as I noticed the woman had wet herself. She was practically naked. The only clothes she had on her were the shredded remains of the top half of her dress and her stockings. I could see her bare breasts and the small bush of blonde hair between her legs, from which the smell of ammonia was emanating. Funnily enough, I felt nothing at the sight of what, in my perception, was a completely naked woman that was rather beautiful. In fact, as I ponder this, I realized I had no sex drive whatsoever. Could it be because I was technically still a child? I mean, I was born only hours ago. Maybe if I run into another of my kind, I would feel something. Also, am I male or female? That's going to be an awkward question. I was a guy before, but I'm not sure now. Oh, I hope I don't have to lay eggs in the future. Well, I suppose that's a question for another time, so I put it out of my mind and began to eat the remains of the bandits. As I took my time enjoying my meal, I could sense the woman getting more and more terrified as I slowly ate the bodies. I could sense her twitch in fear every time the sound of me crunching bones echoed out. I didn't really care, honestly. I just want to be smarter before I talk to her. Hopefully, I could get improved, advanced cognition and auditory communication before I talk to that woman. There's a lot of questions I want to know. What are humans like in this world? And more importantly, what do they think of devourers? As I bit into the final heart, I heard the voice in my head again. Achieved human genome level 210. Advanced cognition improved. Color perception improved. Fine motor skills improved. Auditory communication improved. Human pathogen acquired. Core evolution achieved. Stage 2. Bone spines acquired. Bone spines can be augmented with pathogen and toxin abilities to improve offensive capabilities. As soon as the voice stopped, I felt my shoulders change. I switched my gaze to my shoulders and saw a row of spikes have appeared. As the spikes appeared, I found as usual I instinctively knew how to use them. Now the question was, how accurate were they? I looked at the wagon and focused my eyes on a single point, and I fired one of the spikes. The spike fired from my shoulder and embedded halfway into the wood, only a few centimeters off target. So it's reasonably accurate. Well, that's good enough for now. With that, I turned and slithered over to the woman as I finished up the rest of the corpse I was munching on. When I arrived at the woman, she let out a whimper as she raised her hands up in a show of submission. I have some questions, I say, and I realize my voice is now smoother. It still sounded weird, but at least it didn't sound like a toddler trying to talk anymore. What questions? The woman asked shakily. First things first, do you have a mirror? I ask, and I see her eyes widen slightly in confusion. I do. In the wagon, the woman replied. With that reply, I nodded in the direction of the wagon, and she got the message. She shakily stood up as she instinctively tried to cover herself before realizing it was quite pointless in front of a creature like me. She walked shakily over the wagon and fumbled through the contents of the wagon. Eventually, she took out a mirror about the size of the mirrors they use in barbershops. Point it towards me, I say, and she obeys as she faces the mirror towards me. I could tell she was trying her best to keep the mirror steady. What I saw was surprising to say the least. My face was dome-like and completely smooth. There were no eyes as far as I could tell, no nostril either, just a smooth white surface. I opened my mouth, and it revealed rows upon rows of serrated teeth. Interesting, I say, and I see my mouth move as I speak. I think I know why I sound weird. I don't look like I have lips. I shifted my position so I could see my body profile and saw I actually looked really scary. If I was my old self, I would have pissed myself just like this woman here. That's enough, I say as I gesture for her to put the mirror away, and she puts it on the ground. Good. Now where are you from? I ask as I lean forward and tower over her. I see her eyes widen as my body bathes her in shadow. I could tell she was too afraid to talk. I could have backed off to calm her down, but honestly I was lazy. Plus I had a better idea. I shot one of my spines right next to her feet. She screamed as she jumped away from the spike that was now embedded into the grass. Answer, I growl, trying to make my voice as threatening as possible. The only reason you aren't dead is that I have questions and that I find you mildly amusing. I say as I shoot another spike next to her feet. This time she fell over backwards with a shriek. I transform my arms into bone blades and raise them as if I'm about to cut her in half. I suggest you start talking, I growl again. Avalon, I'm from the city of Avalon, she sobbed as she held up her hands in front of her face. Good, now which way? I ask, and she frantically points down one side of the road. Now then, what is an Iron Rank adventurer? I ask, and I see her look up slightly at my question. Adventurers are... She began but faltered halfway. I use one of my blades to slash at the ground next to her, and she screams as my blade cuts a clean gash across the earth. Monster hunters, they are monster hunters, she wailed as she threw up her hands in effort to shield her face. And the Iron Rank? I ask. It's the lowest rank among the adventurers. The ranks are iron, bronze, silver, gold, platinum, mithril, and hero ranks, she said, babbling as fast as she could. So they hunt monsters like me? I ask. Yes, she replied softly, her voice shaking. Now then, what do you know about primordial devourers? I ask as I lean in. What? She asked, confused. Primordial devourers, what do you know about them? I ask. They don't exist. They're just monsters that live in stories, she replied. What do the stories say? I press. They say the devourers are the first form of life. They say all life came from devourers. All that breathe are progeny of the devourers. The stories say they were wiped long ago, the woman replied. By who? I ask. Many beings, the angels, the demons, the heroes of old, the ancient dragons. The mightiest of the other races all banded together to kill off the devourers. That first war is called the War in Heaven. The angels of heaven tried to wipe out the Devourers that lived in terror. They lost in terror and gave the Devourers the power to enter heaven. They were only defeated after all the other races united against them, the woman replied. And that's it? None were ever seen again, I asked. No, some appear from time to time, hatching from long dormant eggs. When one appears, it always causes untold destruction. Nations fall, cities burn, usually they are defeated by the heroes of man who are aided by the blessings from the angels of heaven. The woman replied, What would happen if another devourer appears? I asked. This perhaps was the most important question. The nations would call their mightiest heroes to defeat it as soon as possible. They have to. The devourers grow stronger over time, they can eat anything, and with each meal, the devourers grow stronger, the woman replied as she faltered, and her eyes widened as she looked at me, the realization hitting her. You don't look anything like the paintings, she said softly. We evolve as we eat. I am sure my appearance will change as I continue to grow. I replied. You aren't going to let me go, are you? The woman said, her voice trembling. If you let me go, I might go back and tell everyone. Then the nations will send their heroes to hunt you down, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Smart one, aren't you? I reply as I bare my teeth. Well, it looks like this discussion is over. Chow time. Wait, may I have a last request? The woman said shakily. What? I ask as I look at her. Could you make it painless? And do the deed from behind? I don't want to see it happen. The woman said as tears flowed down her face. All right, turn around. I say, and she shakily turns around. She kneels with her back to me, and I see her look up at the sky. I could sense her breathing picking up speed. She knows she's about to die, and she is terrified. Well, they say being raped is a fate worse than death. Not sure how true that is. I say as I raise one of my blades. Yes, I suppose it is good. I remained pure to the end. The woman said, choking back a sob as she lowered her head in resignation. Farewell, I say as I bring my blade down and pierce her through the back of her head. The blade goes clean through and her body goes limp. A quick death, simple, painless. Well, so much for that. Funnily enough, I felt a little bad for her. I guess this is the advanced cognition talking. Still, there was no guilt. I just felt it was a little unfortunate that I had to kill her. Oh well, whatever. I bit down onto her torso with the dismissal of that momentary thought and enjoyed the sweet taste of her heart along with the rest of her body. After that, I ate the woman's husband. Father, brother. Whatever, he's food now. As I ate the horses, I heard the voice in my head again. Equus essence acquired. Insufficient essence for assimilation. I wonder what the horse essence will give me. Well, that was a fruitful discussion and a nice meal. What now? With that thought in mind, I looked around and I saw the bandits' trail leading into the forest. I wonder, don't bandits usually have a camp? Would there be more of them? Well, I have no pity for these types of people. To be fair, I have no real pity for anything. Still, these were criminals, and the human part of me still disliked them. Besides, who's going to miss a few dead bandits? I let out a small chuckle as I turned and began following the trail. The trail was quite thick, and honestly it smelled quite unpleasant. I don't think those guys bathed very often. Proper hygiene is probably an abstract concept to them. I wound my way through the forest and followed the trail, and I soon found a narrow path. I think this is the path the bandits took. Then I sensed movement ahead and carefully moved off the path while making sure I made as little noise as possible. What do you think is taking them so long? I heard a voice say as a pair of men appeared walking along the trail. Do you know, maybe they found a pretty girl or something and are having their way with her. The other man replied. They were wearing roughly the same gear as the bandits from before. Same beat-up armor and weapons and the same unwashed scent. Selfish bastards, probably going to have their fun first before dragging her back and let us have the sloppy seconds, the first man said. I hope Boris doesn't kill her. Remember when he killed the one before we got her back? The second man asked. Yeah, I don't know why he likes to choke them as he does his thing. That one was pretty and young too. The boss knocked 2 of his teeth out for it later. The first man said with a laugh. Ha 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 ha. Yeah, I remember that. He was talking like some village idiot for a week. Well, the boss does like the young ones. The second man replied with a chortle. Yeah, that one probably still hadn't even had her first blood yet. She barely had any hair on her. Big mistake, Boris. Big mistake, the first man said with a laugh. All the while they were talking, I was maneuvering behind them, my blades drawn. Their conversation was honestly vaguely disgusting. Looks like that bandit leader's a pedophile. Well, there's going to be one less pedophile in this world soon. Once I was in a good position, I slashed at the neck of the second man that was following the first one. He was immediately relieved of his head, and I saw my body exit invisibility as his headless body fell forward with a thump. The other man yelped as he turned around just in time for me to pepper him with bone spines laced with human pathogen. He staggered back as he looked down in shock at the 6 spines in his chest. Then his eyes turned bloodshot and trickles of blood began flowing down his nose. He gasped as he fell over backwards. I moved closer to him and looked down and saw him gasping as black blood bubbled up from his mouth. I switched one of the blades back to my taloned hands and cut his leather chest armor open. I looked down and saw the spots where the spines had hit looked to be turning black with ugly red veins radiating from the wounds. Whatever this pathogen is, it's fast-acting and looks pretty painful. The blood leaking from the wounds was also black like tar. This looks really effective. I hope it doesn't affect the taste of the meat. Well, I am curious about the full scope of this human pathogen thing. I wonder if it gets any stronger. So with that in mind, I decided to eat the other one first, while keeping an eye on the dying one. He died rather quickly. I got only 2 bites into his friend when his body stilled and went limp. That was what? Less than a minute. As I finished up the second man, I felt something come up in my throat, and I instinctively hacked up something from my mouth. I looked down, and to my surprise I saw a lump of metal that looked to be melted and fused together. Oh, I guess I shouldn't have eaten their armor as well as their bodies. To be fair, at the time it didn't really bother me. I crunched through the metal as easily as I did their bones. Then again, if I just cough it up, doesn't that mean there isn't an issue? I know owls cough up pellets of bone occasionally, and cats do cough up fur balls. It would be quite inconvenient to peel the armor off every time I eat a human. Oh well, forget it. I'll just keep eating it and see what happens. With that meal finished, I re-engaged my invisibility and continued following the trial, and soon I came across a walled camp. The walls were wood, and I could see a guard standing atop a watchtower looking very bored. I also sensed 2 more of the bandits patrolling the perimeter. I clambered up a nearby tree so I could see into the camp. What I saw made me very excited. It's like a continental buffet down there. There's about 2 dozen bandits milling about in the open, probably with more in some of those wooden shacks. There were about 5 women in this wooden pen, and I saw one bandit exit one of the houses and dragged a crying woman along with him. The man opened the pen and chucked her into the pen where she landed in the dirt, a sobbing mess. The men were all using the same beat-up arms and armor. After examining them, I couldn't sense any threat whatsoever. It looks like these guys were just walking and talking meals for me. There was this larger house in the middle where this bonfire was. I'm guessing that's where the bandit leader lives. The house was much better constructed. It wasn't like the crappy shacks around the camp. This one looked like a cottage with proper walls. There were other creatures as well. I saw attack dogs, horses, and this large bear thing. That one looks interesting. Well, well, well. Dinner is served. Chapter 4. Evolving a Conscience. I snuck back down the tree and shrunk my body. I'll take out the 2 patrolling on the perimeter first. I don't want them to run the moment I start wreaking havoc. My plan is to pick off as many of them as possible without the rest finding out. I'm not that worried that they will overwhelm me. I just don't want to deal with 10 people scattering in different directions. Once I reached the 2 men, I waited until the pair were in a spot on their patrol where no one could see them. In one slash, I decapitated the pair of them. I'm still about 2 meters tall at my smallest. It looks like my growth is slowing down, probably because the prey wasn't that big relative to my full size. After taking care of these 2, I grew a little larger so I can scarf their bodies down faster. I don't want anyone finding the bodies early, this way there would only be bloodstains. Still a red flag, but not as bad as corpses. It would at least lead to some confusion before the panic sets in. With that settled, I turned around. I climbed up a nearby tree and looked for a good spot to land when I jumped over. I saw one man walking off the side to take a piss on the wall. I leapt over the wall and drove one of my blades through his head and held his body in place to stop it from falling. I then dragged the body behind a house in a shadowy spot and left it there. I'll be back for it later. I re-engaged my invisibility and snuck out into the middle of the camp. I saw one of the bandits approaching the pen, and I had a suspicion he was about to grab one of the women to have some fun. Well, usually when a man decides to have some fun with the fairer sex, they would want some privacy. Sure enough, he grabbed a young woman with curly matted brown hair, and she sobbed in protest as he dragged the woman to her feet. He dragged her over to a nearby hut. I could tell he was looking to enter this one, so I slipped ahead of the pair and crept through the window. It was just large enough for me to slip through. Luckily, my body was long and not wide, so I still could fit. With that, I waited in the corner of the room, and sure enough, the door opened. The man dragged the sobbing woman in and yanked her towards a nearby bed made of wood and straw. The woman tried to struggle, but the man backhanded her across the face and tossed her onto the bed. The woman, now bleeding from a split lip, quietly sobbed on the bed as the man began taking his pants off. I got behind him and increased in size so I could tower over the bed. I had a plan on how to kill them both at once, but I needed to be big enough. The man growled as he climbed onto the bed and pulled her legs apart. He then tried to position his member at her entrance, and as he did so, he leaned forward slightly. There's the moment I'm looking for. I raised my blade, which was almost 1/2 meter long, and I stabbed in through the man's back. I kept pushing forward. The blade skewered the woman underneath him. The woman let out a scream of pain as she felt the blade stab into her chest. "Oh, I quiet it down in there," I heard another man shout from outside. With that, I brought down another blade and stabbed it into her face. Her body twitched for a moment before stilling. I'll just leave these two here for the moment. With that, I crawled back out the window. I don't have much time now. The bandits will eventually notice that those are now silent, which means I need to start my rampage soon. I saw a group of 5 of them sitting together at the fire. I guess I'll start with them. I slithered up behind them and grew to my full size and saw that I was now towering 5 meters tall. I'll take them out and then fire some spines at the guy on the watchtower. Don't want him to escape. The rest will still have to get the gate open. That should buy me time to kill them. So I raised my blade and slashed at the 5 of them. My blades, now 2 meters long, cut through them like a hot knife through butter. The bandits around me immediately shouted in alarm as my massive form materialized in thin air. I turned and fired a wave of spikes at the man at the watchtower. He was thrown back and was pinned to the side of the watchtower. At this size, my spines were the size of a man's forearm. The bandits, which I hoped will at least try to fight, all turned and ran. Well, so much for that. I hurtled through the camp blades, flashing and spines firing. Bodies dropped to the ground in pieces or flew back and were pinned to nearby walls by my spines. Their screams and raw terror was intoxicating. As I expected, I saw about half of them run for the gate. The ones who got there first tried to get the gate open, but the ones behind yanked them back and tried to get the door open themselves in panic. In their blind panic, they ended up getting in each other's way, well, all the more easier for me. I sped towards the gate, blades drawn, and the men turned and saw my charging form. Their eyes widened in terror, faces now pale as parchment. I could see their pupils dilate as they realized they were about to die, and they screamed. I slashed at the group of men with all 4 hands. I ended up cutting them to pieces, demolished the gate and part of the wall behind them. I also accidentally collapsed the watchtower to my right as I caught the supports of the watchtower with my backswing. As I took in the wrecked wall and watchtower, I realized my body is harder to control at this size. I guess it makes sense. The smaller something is, the easier it is to mess something up when you try to handle it. As the smell of that red scarlet nectar washed over me, I felt a kind of weird feral happiness. I laughed and turned around to see the last remaining few bandits trying to climb over a section of wall. Again, these idiots tried to get up first and ended up slowing each other down. I charged them with my vision, now turning red and their hearts pulsing brighter than ever in my vision. I could have used my spines to kill them, but it was so much more fun to use my blades. When I was upon the 4 of them, I opened my jaws and snapped up the one at the top of the wall. I closed my teeth around his body, and it was snapped clean in half, his lower body tumbling back down into the dirt. The others shouted as they tried to run, 3 quick slashes later, and there were now 6 pieces staining the dirt red. Unable to resist, I snapped up one torso as a quick snack, and I turned around to see a few stragglers running for the now destroyed gate. One of them even managed to get a horse and was riding towards the opening. Well, horse or no, I was much faster, and soon I was upon him. I opened my maw and snapped up the man right off the horse. At the same time, I slashed at the horse, and the horse's body rolled away in 2 halves. I raised my head and swallowed his whole body, enjoying the feeling of his body sliding down my throat. The few remaining behind me were now running towards the large house. As far as I could sense, there were only these few left, and I could smell something in the big house. I charged those remaining and easily cut them down. All this fighting was making me quite hungry, so I snapped up one of the bodies in my jaws, savoring the delectable taste. With that, I looked around and saw no more bandits. I turned and saw the women all cowering in their pen, the scent of ammonia thick around them like a miasma. Well, they weren't going anywhere. That just leaves the house. I switched my blades back to my claws and I tore the wall open, not bothering to shrink down to go through the door. When I entered the room, the whole place reeked of someone's scent. I saw on the bed there was a girl's leg spread and splayed on the bed. I noted she looked the youngest amongst all the women. She had a smaller frame and a childlike face. Her breasts were also small, with an overall petite appearance. I guess the bandit leader couldn't actually get his hands on any kids, so he settled for the next best thing. I realized the smell was emanating from between her legs, and as I got close, I realized the bandit leader had just probably finished up when I started to attack. The girl was still panting, and her eyes were rolled up into her head. His leftovers looked fresh. Now that left the real question, where the hell was he? Then I saw a trail leading out the window. Ah, so he ran. I turned and smashed my way through the wall and saw the trail went over the nearby wall. Well, he had only 2 choices, honestly. He could die in that room, or he could die running. With that thought and a laugh, I smashed through the wood wall, the logs that made up the wall splintering like a bunch of toothpicks. I looked to the trail, and I could see a figure sprinting away from the camp. Now this is much more fun. I instinctively let out a roar and started chasing him. In just a few seconds, I have obliterated whatever pathetic lead he could muster on his puny legs. He turned and screamed just as I opened my maw and closed it around him. The last thing he saw was my teeth as I snatched him up and tore him in half. Leader or no, he dies all the same. With the hunt over, and as I devoured the bandit leader's other half, I felt the elation of the hunt start to fade and my vision started to lose its red tinge. Gradually, I felt my mind clear and I realized I lost control a little there. Is this what they call a feeding frenzy? Like when sharks smell a drop of blood in the water or something? This is a little scary. I guess I'll figure this out later. I still had a feast and few loose ends to tie up back at the camp. When I got back to the camp, I spotted the women in the pen had escaped and they were standing in the middle of the camp. They froze when they saw me, their eyes filling with fear. Well, I had no intention of allowing them to walk away if they left and told someone about me. Then I think I will have to deal with more than just bandits. One of the women ran forward and picked up one of the fallen swords of the bandits. She scrambled to raise the sword, and I smiled. This was quite the sight. This woman was stark naked, covered in filth, and her sword was shaking like a leaf in the wind. I transformed my hands into blades, and her face crumpled. The sword fell down to the earth listlessly, and I saw whatever faint, desperate hope in her eyes shatter into 1,000 pieces. The woman looked down at the sword, then raised it again. At first I thought she was going to try to fight, but then she grabbed the sword by the blade, and to my surprise, she rammed the tip of the blade into her throat. She choked and gagged for a moment before crumpling to the ground, choking and gasping as her life drained away. So better to die by the blade than to my teeth. Well, it would be less painful. The other women looked at the soon-to-be corpse in mute horror, then their gaze shifted to me. At that moment I felt a little bad. These women just had the worst luck in the world. Once again, as quickly it came, the feeling faded, and I took aim with my spikes. I fired a wave of spines, impaling the remaining women. They were instantly thrown against the dirt as my spines knocked them off their feet. They gasped and twitched before stilling. I saw one give me one last look of terror before her eyes softened and the light left her eyes. Again, I was struck with that slightly bad feeling. I guess this is just the vestiges of my old self. I wonder if this is because I'm eating humans and getting improved, advanced cognition. I doubt I will fully sympathize with humans. My mind just seemed too attracted to the idea of killing and eating for me to realistically abstain from killing humans. I may end up preferring other prey, but I somehow just knew I would never be above killing them. I then turned away from the sight of the dead women, and I looked around and saw there were still some horses struggling against the ropes that tied them to nearby posts. I fired another wave of spines, and the horses all collapsed, their bodies covered in my spines. That leaves this weird bear thing. It was quite large, and it was horned. Odd-looking creature. It was terrified, I could see in its eyes. It was backed against the back of its iron cage, and it was shaking. Its fur was brown like a normal bear. If you ignore the horns and its size, it would pass for a normal bear. Well, let's see what it gives me. I slashed at the cage, and the crude iron was cut through like paper. I swapped two of my blades back into taloned hands and pulled the cage apart. I then brought my blade down, skewering the bear against the floor. I grabbed it, bringing it up to my mouth, and began to eat it, fur, horns and all. I just tore into it like it was a baked potato or something. After I finished, I heard the voice again. Ursus cornutum essence acquired. Insufficient essence for assimilation. Well, I guess I need a few more of those. I then went on to the horses after I ate the second last horse. I heard the voice in my head again. Achieved Equus genome level 110. Muscle strength improved. Bone density improved. Well, those were pretty boring upgrades. Then again, I guess horses were boring. After I finished up the horses, I moved on to the human corpses. This time, there were more than 30 bodies for me to eat. So I was sure I would get another genome upgrade. I got halfway through the bodies when I heard the voice sound off in my head. Achieved human genome level 310. Advanced cognition improved. Color perception improved. Fine motor skills improved. Auditory communication improved. Okay, so more of the same, pretty boring. When I finished the rest of the bodies, nothing else happened. It looks like the requirements for upgrades increase as the stages go up. I guess for stage 10, I'll have to eat a whole city or something. That'll take a while. Would that be even worth the effort? I mean, that would probably take days. Or maybe stronger humans are worth more, like those gold-ranked adventures. Well, I'll find out if that's true at some point. I mean, the plan doesn't change. I just have to keep eating them. That leaves one last thing, the unconscious girl in the house. I didn't sense any movement in the house the entire time I was eating. I guess she's out cold. Well, I might as well finish her off and move on. Judging by the sky, it's going to be night soon. I guess soon I'll be a day old. Feels like more has happened today than my entire past life. I wonder what my life will be like in this world. Will I just live alone? Maybe I'll make some friends. I have a feeling this life will be quite lonely. Wait. Did I just think about being lonely and having friends? Is this the advanced cognition talking? Well, I do have a way to test this. It's lying unconscious in that house. When I re-entered the house, I saw the girl was still unconscious on the bed. I could see bruises have formed around her throat, making a blue and black ring around her neck. Her nethers were also red and swollen, probably from what that bandit did to her. Well, I should probably kill her and get this over with. I transformed one of my hands into blades and raised it, preparing to stab her in the head. Then I saw her shift slightly and she turned to the side. Her eyes scrunched together and she curled up into a fetal position. I could tell her eyes were darting around under her closed eyelids. It looks like she's having a nightmare. Then I saw tears flow out from under her eyelids. Again, I felt bad for her. This time the feeling was stronger. Crap, looks like my suspicions were right. Eating humans makes me grow a conscience. This is quite ironic. I get the ability to feel guilty about killing humans by eating humans. To be fair, she was unconscious the moment I found her. I think that bandit lord probably choked her out while he was defiling her. She won't know what I am. She'll just wake up to this destroyed camp. I don't really have a reason to kill her. If she saw me, then I know I can easily kill her because she'll put me in danger. But now, she's no threat to me, and I don't really want to keep eating humans. The last thing I want now is a full-blown conscience. I mean, even now, what I feel isn't exactly pity, it's more like I feel it would be a pointless kill. Like, why kill her? There's not much reason for it. She's so small, she probably won't make a dent in my growth. If I keep eating humans, this feeling bad thing is going to get worse, so I don't think I want to eat her because of that. So what? I just kill her and leave her corpse here? What's the point in that? With a sigh, I turned my blade into my taloned hands and turned away. At the opening, I turned back to take one last look at her and pondered how this is the first living thing I let live so far. For better or worse, I'm smarter now and not some dumb, ferocious monster. Being smart is good, right? When I really need it, I will be able to better strategize. I took a final look at the quietly crying girl on the bed and muttered one last thing. Good luck. Chapter 5. The Work of the Beast. Lily stirred as she blinked the sleep from her eyes. She sat up and winced as she felt a stinging pain from between her legs. Her whole body ached, and the area around her neck felt so sore she could barely move her head. She sat up from the bed and looked up. Her eyes widened, and her mouth fell open in shock as she beheld the gaping hole in the wall. She looked around the room and saw there was another hole in the side of the wall. She could see from the hole the camp was wrecked and the gate was almost completely destroyed. The watchtower was now a pile of rubble, and part of the wall was also destroyed. Did the camp get attacked? Were there rescuers? A search party from Avalon? But then why was she still here? Did they leave her behind? The last thing she remembered was that foul creature's hand around her neck and his rod inside her. She looked off to the side and saw the body-length mirror the brute stole from some poor merchant weeks ago. She staggered to her feet, trying to ignore the searing pain in her nethers and neck. Lily got a few steps forward and collapsed onto the floor. She looked up and saw her haggard reflection in the knocked-over mirror. Her dead eyes, matted hair, and an ugly ring of purple around her neck reflected in the cracked surface. With a groan, she tried to get to her feet again, and this time she managed to walk. She staggered over to the massive hole where the door used to be. Lily didn't know what to think when she saw the total devastation around her. All was silent. Not a soul was there, not even the dogs, horses, or that horned bear that was locked in that iron cage. The camp was totally destroyed, only about half the shacks were still standing. She looked back at the walls of the house and realized it was a miracle that the house didn't collapse. Then Lily felt the cold on her bare skin. It was a welcome chill. Ever since she was dragged here, she has been locked in that house with that monster. She needed clothes. Clothes. It has been weeks since she wore them. Lily stumbled over to the dresser and saw that for some reason that monster left his prized horned bear pelt coat behind. She grabbed whatever clothes she felt would fit and tried not to gag as she smelt that man's scent on the clothes. Now covered up, her eyes wandered to that monster's sword that lay against the wall. The weapon was still in its scabbard. She walked shakily over to it and grabbed it, intent on using it as a walking stick. The moment she lifted the sword, it suddenly struck her. She was free. Whatever happened here had freed her. She could go home. The thought brought her to her knees as tears fell freely. The nightmare was over. Lily didn't know how long she cried as she knelt on the floor, but when the tears dried, she felt something in her chest she had not felt in a long time. Hope. That hope gave her the strength to rise, and her mind immediately went to how she was going to get home. She needed food and water. She remembered there was a trail out of the camp. After that, she had no idea. Well, she would rather die to the fangs of wolves than be used as a toy by that brute. So she gathered whatever supplies she could scrounge up in the house. It wasn't hard. The brute kept all the nice cheese in this house, and she found his water skin. She picked up the water skin and found it full. So with supplies in hand and the sword as a walking stick, she took her first steps out of the house. When the chill of the forest touched her face, she was almost overwhelmed again, but this time she managed to steel herself. The heavens have given her a second chance. She would not squander this gift. As she walked towards the gate, she noticed pools of dried blood in dirt, but no bodies. Then she noticed strange spines made of white bone in the dirt. These were blood-stained and were as large as a dagger. She looked over to the empty pen where they kept the other girls and saw no bloodstains there. Maybe they got out too. She looked around at the damage and saw slashes on the walls and in the dirt. Whatever made these gashes was large. The gashes were wider and longer than any gash she had ever seen. Then she arrived at the iron cage where that horned bear was kept, and saw the iron was horribly bent, and it looked like the cage was cut apart by some kind of blade. Outside the cage was a small puddle of blood. As she continued through the camp, the realization started to sink in that whatever did this wasn't human. It was large and it was powerful. Those bastards probably didn't even stand a chance, judging by the weapons lying next to dried pools of blood. When Lily reached the gate, she saw the same gashes streaked across the logs that made up the walls. It looks like the blades went through the wood like paper. The wood wasn't even splintered at the gashes. It was a clean cut that gouged a neat gash through the wood. Finally, she took her first unsteady step outside camp, and she paused. She took one last look at the utterly destroyed camp and privately vowed never to return. She somehow knew in her heart those bastards were dead. Whatever did this made sure of that. Now she just needed to get to the main road and maybe, just maybe, she would get home. With the thought of her parents' face in her mind, she took a determined step out into the forest. Then another and another. She would get home or die trying. Beatrice was quite nervous, truth be told. She is a bestiarian, a researcher of the many forms of life scattered across Terra. She finds comfort in books and dissection tables. Now she was riding in a wagon, being dragged out of the Avalon. Beatrice internally cursed her luck of being activated for a new monster contact protocol. Apparently the road patrols found an attacked merchant wagon on the road, and they found some odd things at the site. So since Beatrice was the royal bestiarian for the city-state of Avalon, she was being set out to investigate. She wasn't good with people, or the outdoors for that matter. Well, yes, she is really good at her job and outperformed even her peers who were decades older than her. She's only in her mid-20s and she's already been recognized as the best bestiarian in Avalon. Still, that doesn't mean she's good at fieldwork. She's good at analyzing samples that end up on her desk, not going out there and finding out what the hell happened. Now she would have to go out there in the cold and work with strangers. Heavens, she hated strangers. Her colleagues often made snide remarks about her, sometimes behind her back, sometimes right in her face because of her social anxiety. One of the most common ones she hears is when she receives any romantic advances from anyone. Beatrice isn't interested in your boner, brother. The only bones she's interested in are the kind that she can reassemble. That was a common one. Well, to be fair, she could reassemble any skeleton from memory, but still, that's mean. So with a sigh, she looked up and saw the horses pulling her wagon. On horseback around the wagon were the gold-ranked adventurers that had been contracted to escort her to the site. She let out another sigh as she looked back down, trying to catch anyone's eye, and pulled her fur coat around her shoulders a little closer to keep out the cold. When Beatrice finally reached the site, she struggled to get off the wagon, only to be helped off by one of the gold-ranked adventurers. "Steady now, ma'am," the gold-ranked warrior said as he helped her with a smile. "Thank you," she mumbled in reply and quietly began shuffling towards the site. When Beatrice looked over the site, she saw guards posted around it. They had stuck sticks into the ground around the areas of interest. The first thing she noticed was the wagon was wrecked. Something had broken a wheel and the horses were nowhere to be seen. Funnily, there were no bodies. The bodies might have been eaten. "Are there any remains?" Beatrice asked timidly to a nearby guard. "Huh? Who are you?" the guard replied gruffly. "Yep." Beatrice yelped as she shrunk back, and the guard recoiled slightly in surprise at her reaction. "This is Madame Beatrice Godwin, the royal bestiarian of Avalon," the gold-ranked adventurer said helpfully from the side. Beatrice saw the eyes of the guard widen in surprise, and he immediately bowed forward. "My apologies, ma'am," the guard said hurriedly. "It's okay," Beatrice replied softly. She was asking about the bodies. The adventurer said, trying to speed things along. Yes, of course, good sir. We have found no bodies here or nearby. There are patches of dried blood, however, and what looks like tracks made by some kind of serpent, along with some other strange observations, the guard said as he turned his head to the wagon. Can you show me the tracks first? Beatrice said softly. At once, ma'am, the guard said. Beatrice was brought to a section of grass that looks to be trampled. She looks down and pushes up the large glasses on her face. As she examines the tracks, she noted the guards were right. This does look like a serpent-type trail, a long body slithering across the grass. It's heavy, a voice said from behind her, and Beatrice nearly jumped out of skin. Angelina, careful, she's skittish, Beatrice heard the adventurer say. She turned to see the ranger in the adventurer's party. As she got a good look at this, Angelina, she noted she was a half-elf. A rare species, interrace procreation is difficult, with only 10% of the fertilization chance for the lower fertility species. Elves also had an extremely low fertility, with only a 10% chance of pregnancy during ovulation, meaning that there is only a 1% chance of fertilization for a human-elf couple. Half-elves also had longer lifespans, not as long as pure blood elves. All these facts rang in her head as she looked at Angelina, all the information being pulled from her memory instinctively. Hello? Angelina said, and Beatrice realized she had been staring blankly at her. Oh yes, why do you say it's heavy? Beatrice asked. The tracks aren't wide, but they are deep. A serpent of this size shouldn't leave such deep tracks. My best guess is that this creature is only a serpent on the bottom half, with some other torso body type, Angelina said as she looked back at the tracks. That made sense. Full serpents usually leave shallow tracks because their weight is distributed across a wider area. This one isn't that wide, yet the tracks are deep, which means chances are Angelina was correct. Heavens, she needs to improve her fieldwork. I think you're right, Beatrice said with a nod as shifted her gaze back to the tracks. What do you think it is? Angelina said. Can't tell with just the tracks. There are many species that have serpent-type lower halves. Naga, gorgons, snakefolk. Too many to list, Beatrice replied. Okay, then let's see what else we can find, Angelina said as she turned to the guard. What else is there that seems strange? Beatrice asked tentatively at the guard. The thing that stands out the most would be this, the guard said as his voice grew troubled. Beatrice was brought over to the wagon and she spotted a white protrusion in the wood. Closer inspection revealed that it was some kind of bone spine. It must have been propelled at great force for it to be embedded so deeply in the wood. We haven't touched it. We were afraid it's poisoned, the guard said. Yes, it might be, but first I need to remove it from the wood. Hang on, Beatrice said as she reached for a tool on her belt. She pulled out a set of pliers and she used it to grasp the end spine. She tried pulling, but it didn't even budge. She tired again, groaning, but still nothing. Need a hand? Angelina asked. Yes, please, Beatrice said in response as she panted. Angelina took the pliers and pulled. Again, it didn't budge. Damn, this thing is stuck hard, Angelina said as she pulled again, this time harder, but still the spine didn't budge. Let me try, the adventurer said. Sure thing, Gregor. Be careful you don't break it, Angelina said as she handed him the pliers. Gregor looked to be the party's warrior. He wore fine plate armor and looked to be quite strong. He grabbed the pliers and pulled. Again, it didn't budge. Heavens, this thing is stuck hard, Gregor said as he pulled again, and this time he got it out. But he took the wood with it. Oh no, Angelina said with a sigh at the sight of the destroyed side of the wagon. It's not broken though. Tough little thing, Gregor said as he looked down at the spine held in the pliers. Let me see, Beatrice said. Beatrice took the pliers and flipped down a magnifying lens built into her hat. A magic light on her hat came on and shined a light onto the spine. As Beatrice examined, she realized she didn't recognize this kind of spine. It was definitely an interesting spine. It had hooks running along the edge to make it harder to pull out. And there looked to be small holes running along the edge of the spine. Poison holes. This spine is supposed to inject poison into the target. I don't recognize this type of spine, Beatrice said as she looked away from it. I guess you should take it back and maybe see if you can find anything in your archives, Angelina suggested. Yes, that would be best, Beatrice said as she took out her pouch and carefully placed it in. The moment she let go and the spine fell, It cut straight through the bottom of the pouch and dropped out. The spine landed a centimeter away from her foot and embedded into the ground. Everyone froze at the sight of the spine, now embedded in the ground so close to impaling her feet. Okay. That was close, Angelina said. You got a better pouch? Gregor suggested softly from the side. That's my best one. It's demi-griff leather, Beatrice replied softly, now feeling quite shaken. Demi-griff leather was an extremely tough leather. It was so tough, in fact, it was favored for its use as armor, used by high-ranking adventurers. Damn, Angelina said softly. Could you break off a piece of wood? Beatrice said. After a piece of wood was obtained, Beatrice dropped the spine onto it, and it was once again embedded into the wood. Though this time not as deeply, she carefully placed the piece of wood at the back of the wagon and headed back to the site. Okay, what else? Angelina asked as she looked at the guards. There's patches of dried blood scattered about. Some of them had weapons next to them, the guard said. What weapons? Gregor asked. This is one of them, the guard said as he walked over next to the wagon and picked up something wrapped in cloth. He unfurled the wrapping and handed a beat-up sword to Gregor. Gregor paused as he examined the sword. This is pretty crap gear. My best guess would be the type of weapons used by bandits, Gregor said. That was our guess as well, the guard said. There are 2 more patches of blood further away. The trail leads to patches of blood, the guard said. So the bandits attacked this wagon. It looks like a merchant wagon. Then the bandits were attacked by this monster, Beatrice said as she analyzed the information. Yeah, the 2 patches of blood further away were found without weapons. But we found weapons lying over there without any blood nearby. We assumed the bandits dropped their weapons and ran. They didn't get far, only about 10 meters that way, the guard said as he pointed into the distance. There is something else, the guard said. Beatrice asked. We found this lying in the grass, the guard said as he reached down and picked up a mirror? A mirror, Angelina asked. Could it be a gorgon? Mirrors are used against gorgons, Gregor suggested. No, gorgons don't have the ability to fire poisoned spines. It could be basilisk, but no. Basilisks have a fully serpent body type, so it doesn't match the tracks. And they can't fire spines either. If petrification was used, then there would be statues around here, Beatrice said. Maybe one of the victims thought it was a gorgon, Angelina suggested. Or a basilisk, Gregor added. No way some merchant or bandit will be able to tell a giant snake is a basilisk. Most likely they thought it's a gorgon. The snake hair is a dead giveaway, Angelina replied. True, Gregor said as he cupped his chin. There is one last thing, the guard said. Which is? Angelina asked. This here, the guard said as he walked over to an area marked by sticks. Beatrice walked over and saw there were spines here as well, embedded in the earth. What's more, there was this long gash in the earth and a splatter of dried blood in the dirt. That looks like a blade slash, Gregor said. What the hell is this thing? Looks like a gorgon, a serpent's lower half. It's big, it can fire spines, and now it has blades, Angelina said in bewilderment. Beatrice cupped her chin and tried to put the pieces together. Looks like a gorgon or some other creature that uses petrification. Serpent lower body. Rather large, probably larger than a man. Poisoned bone spines that can be fired at high speed. Blades. Probably ate the bodies, which is why none are here. Definitely faster than a man since those bandits were caught quickly. Nothing matches all of these. Halt, Beatrice heard a guard shout. The group turned to see a group of guards with their weapons drawn facing the forest. Then she saw a woman staggering out of the trees. She was wearing a fur coat and using a sword as a walking stick. She got 2 steps onto the road and fell onto the ground. Help me, the woman croaked out. What the hell? Gregor said as he rushed over. Beatrice stood up and followed behind the rest, and when she got close she saw this woman looked to be in bad shape. When the woman looked up from the ground, she saw a ring of ugly black bruises around her neck. Whoa, I think she's been choked out, Angelina said. Where are you from? Gregor asked. Escaped from a bandit camp. Lost in the forest. 2 days, the woman replied weakly. Bandit camp, Gregor said as he turned to look at Angelina, who gave him a look. Yo, Feely, get over here, Gregor shouted, and the party's priest ran over. Heal her up, will you? Gregor said. Once healed, the woman sighed in relief as her bruises faded. "What happened?" Angelina asked. "I woke up after being—" The woman faltered as she bit her lip. "Woke up?" Angelina pressed. "I woke up on the bed. After the leader of the bandits defiled me. The camp was destroyed by something large," the woman said shakily. "No bodies?" Angelina asked as she raised a brow. The woman looked at her suddenly at those words. "No." "How did you know?" the woman asked. "Same thing behind me. Come with me for a moment. I want to see if you recognize something," Angelina said as she helped the woman to her feet. The woman was brought to the wagon, and when Angelina showed her the bone spine, the woman's eyes widened in recognition. "You've seen this before," Angelina stated. "Yes, but," the woman replied. "But," Angelina pressed, "the ones I saw were larger, much larger," the woman said. "How much larger?" Angelina asked. "The ones I saw were about as long as my forearm," the woman said. At those words, Beatrice's eyes widened. The spines here were only about 15 centimeters long. "This site is still quite fresh. The attack happened only a few days ago. No creature can grow this fast, which means there's more than one." "There's more than one," Beatrice said, her voice barely above a whisper. "A mother and its child?" Angelina asked. "Possibly," Beatrice said shakily. Beatrice shut her eyes for a moment and steeled herself before she reached into her pouch, pulled out the royal seal of authority and unfurled it. She held it out for all to see, and she began to speak. "By the power granted to me by the throne of Avalon, I, Beatrice Godwin, royal bestiarian of Avalon, hereby declare a new monster appearance. All roads are to be locked down. Messengers are to be sent to the villages. Until instructed, all unauthorized travel is prohibited." Chapter 6. The Council of Lords. Beatrice walked nervously towards the king's conference room as she pushed her trolley filled with reports and specimens. The past 2 days were absolute chaos. According to protocol, guards and iron to silver ranked adventurers were supposed to make quick forays into forest to gather information. Honestly, Beatrice had many misgivings with this part of the protocol. It was basically trading lives in the hopes of information. Sadly, lives have already been traded. As of now, all forays into the forest have been put on hold. So far, 5 guard squads of 5 men each, 2 iron-ranked adventurer teams, 1 bronze-rank adventurer team, and 1 silver-rank adventurer team have vanished. That brings the death toll to 53, not counting the bandits and the attacked civilians. There were other concerning news as well. She would have to report all of this to the powerful men and women of Avalon. To say Beatrice was nervous would be grievous understatement. When Beatrice arrived at the door of the conference room, she took a deep breath to calm her racing heart. "You can do this," Beatrice muttered to herself as her assistants all gave her a funny look. "Okay," Beatrice said to herself as she motioned for one of her assistants to open the door. "Ah, Madam Beatrice, I hope you have prepared something that will help us with this situation," Lord Avalon said as he pinched the bridge of his nose. "This city-state is ruled by House Avalon. Their family is known for their fair skin and flaming red hair. Their eyes were also special, with their irises looking like pairs of rubies in their eye sockets." Beatrice could see the crown prince sitting to the king's right, with his younger sister sitting to the king's left. The king once had an eldest daughter, but she died of a mysterious illness years ago. So now he was left with 2 children. "I have some things to report, but I am not sure if I have anything that will help find this new monster," Beatrice replied shakily. "Just report them then, Madam Beatrice. We will see what we can do with whatever information you have," Lord Avalon said with a sigh. "Yes. As all of you are aware, we have lost some men in an attempt to find the new monsters. Not only that, thus far we have been unable to locate the bandit camp from which," Beatrice said as she looked down at one of the reports, "Mrs. Lillian Gespot. She was lost for 2 days, so she is of little help in locating the camp. 2 teams of silver-ranked adventurers sent out to locate the camp. Thus far, only 1 has returned. At first I thought I could use the directions of the disappeared teams to narrow down a search area for either the bandit camp or the location of the monster, but the disappearances appear to be happening in almost every general direction." As a result, I have determined chances are the monsters are either scattered in different locations or they are moving through the forest extremely rapidly. Both scenarios are concerning. Beatrice finished with a mutter. Could it be that some of the teams were lost to the other monsters in the forest? The prince asked. Unlikely, my prince. My adventurer teams are not so easily wiped out. If this is the work of other monsters, some wounded adventurer teams would have returned. Especially the bronze rank and above teams, a man with a scarred face said. This man is named Vilnol, the head of the Avalon Adventurer Guild. He was once a mithril-ranked adventurer in this prime. Now he administers to the Adventurer Guild branch in Avalon. Yes, there should be no monsters in the forest that can wipe out silver-ranked teams, Beatrice added. Indeed, in addition, my returning teams have some additional troubling news to augment your report, Madame Beatrice. Vilnol said with a grimace. And that is? Lord Avalon asked. The forest is quiet. Too quiet. Something in that forest has spooked many of the beasts that live in those great woods. The teams covered a total area 20 kilometers wide, and across that entire area, the forest was silent as the grave. No wolves, no horned bears, no stalker chameleons, nothing. Yes, the forays did not venture too deeply into the forest, entering less than a kilometer in, but still a silent forest for 20 kilometers is concerning, Vilnol said with a scowl. In addition, my spies have found something interesting, a woman said as she calmly took a sip from a glass of wine. Beatrice didn't recognize her. Then again, she didn't mingle much with members of the court, for obvious reasons. I am Serana, spy master for Lord Avalon. We have not met as of yet, Madame Beatrice, the woman said with a sly smile. What have you found out, Serana? Lord Avalon asked impatiently. It actually pertains to the Adventurer Guild. My Lord Vilnol, are you aware a 4-man iron-ranked adventurer team disappeared a day before that wagon was found? Serana said with a smile. Yes, I suspected they might have run into the new monsters, but I could not find any additional information on it. They did not leave on any contracts. I have no records on where they might have gone. Vilnol replied gruffly. Well, you see, my lord, a little bird has sung me an interesting song. Those adventurers were overheard bragging about having a treasure map in your Adventurer Guild Hall. That treasure map apparently leads into the forest, and the place they were seeking is apparently some ancient tomb, Serana said. Ancient tomb? Where did they get that map? Lord Avalon asked. Apparently it was a family heirloom, Serana replied. I'll have my men question them after this, Lord Avalon said. I already did so, my lord. The original owner died long ago. All the living members of her family know is that it's an old heirloom passed down through generations and that it's a map. They also confirmed that the map leads into the forest, Serana said. An ancient tomb. Could it have been released from that tomb? Vilnol asked. It is possible. We do have records of ancient creatures sometimes residing in tombs, Beatrice said. Okay, so we might have a place of origin, Vilnol muttered as he cupped his chin. I'll have my mithril-ranked team search the forest for the tomb, Vilnol said. Is that wise? Avalon has been here for hundreds of years, if no one has found it so far, and seeing as we have no clues whatsoever on where it is unlikely we would be able to find it, Serana replied. I will have to agree with Serana on this. We should not risk this city's only mithril-ranked adventurer team on a wild goose chase. We will need them to fight the beasts when we find them, Lord Avalon said with a sigh. Very well, Vilnol replied. Now then, Madame Beatrice, my forge master, has said you ran some tests on the properties of those spines you found. Lord Avalon said, Yes, we ran tests. Thus far we have not been able to ascertain from what species of monster it came from. The spines match nothing on record, Beatrice said. Maybe it's a primordial devourer, Serana suggested with a light laugh. This is not the time for jokes, Serana, Vilnol replied with a scowl. Yes, categorizing the beast as a primordial devourer would be like stating the monster is a monster. According to the legends, the devourers steal abilities from all the creatures it consumes. It has no consistent form or abilities. We have no records on where the devourers have received what abilities, so we do not know what abilities are innate or acquired. Their forms also vary greatly, with some developing wings, some becoming aquatic, others becoming insectoid in appearance. Nothing is consistent with them. No amount of information will allow us to narrow it down to such a conclusion. Beatrice replied seriously. "It's a joke, Madam Beatrice," Sarana said with a wry smile. "Oh," Beatrice replied, blushing a scarlet. "Enough. What else have you found, Madam Beatrice?" Lord Avalon said, interrupting impatiently. "The spines are unlike anything we have a record of. We estimate they are as strong as dragon bones at the very least. In addition, we ran some strength testing on the spines. It has cut through every known piece of leather, fabric, and hide we could get our hands on. We then tested it on metals, and we found it could be resisted to an acceptable degree by mithril, although it is still able to damage a mithril ingot, which implies it is harder than mithril. Lastly, we tested its resilience to environmental factors. All available acids and venoms proved ineffective. Freezing did nothing, and neither did heating," Beatrice said as she picked up a wooden box and opened it. The box contained the 3 spines they found. They were held in place by metal clamps, with no contact with edges, since these spines proved to be able to cut even mithril. The one on the left is the one we tested with the metals and leathers. The one in the middle is the one we tested with environmental effects, like temperature and acid. The one on the right is the control where we conducted no testing. After the tests, we examined the spines again, and our observations revealed no damage to any of the spines. The tested spines were identical to the control spine," Beatrice said as she looked down at the 3 identical-looking spines. "This is the ingot we tested the spines against," Beatrice said as she reached down and pulled out with some difficulty a mithril ingot about as long as a hand. "Someone give the poor girl a hand," Lord Avalon said with a sigh at the sight of Beatrice struggling with the ingot. One of the nearby guards took the ingot from Beatrice and held the striked surface for the room to see. The ingot has been gouged by the spine, but it has been stopped by it, not penetrating through. The concern here was that the spine went 2 centimeters into the ingot. Most armor is at most 1 centimeter thick. This is troubling. Whatever this creature is, it's powerful and very dangerous," Vilnol said with a grimace. "Indeed, and if I recall, that Lillian girl said she found spines as long as her arm. If one of those spines hits any human, it can be safe to assume that the wound may be potentially fatal," Sarana said calmly. "Yes, we suspected the same. In addition, there were poison holes in the spine. However, we found no trace of poison within the spine. It is unclear whether the poison is a rapidly decaying variant, or if there is in fact no poison," Beatrice said. "Is that all?" Lord Avalon asked with another sigh as he pinched the bridge of his nose. "Yes, my lord," Beatrice said with a bow. "Very well. Is there anything else from anyone else?" Lord Avalon asked, and when he received no reply, he nodded to himself in resignation. "You are all dismissed, Sarana, Vilnol, and Georgia. I need a moment of your time," Lord Avalon said. Lord Avalon watched as the room cleared out, leaving the 3 individuals he requested. These 3 were the only people in this kingdom outside of his family that knew of the cradle and the prophecy. "Has the task force been sent to the cradle?" Lord Avalon asked. "They left this morning, my lord. They should arrive by dawn tomorrow," Sarana replied. "Georgia, do you think that the monster could potentially destroy the sealing crystals?" Lord Avalon asked, as he turned to his head mage, Georgia Mercy. She looked down for a moment as if contemplating. "With what we know so far, or more accurately with so little information, it is difficult to say. The spines are the most concerning part of the report. If such powerful bones can be used as disposable projectiles, I cannot imagine the strength of the creature's body. Although most monsters either prefer flesh, vegetation, or ether. Since the monster is suspected to be carnivorous, it should have little interest in the ether within the sealing crystals," Georgia replied. "My operative will speak with the princess when he arrives. I know you wish to be there, since tomorrow is the day she comes of age. Supposedly that is when the prophecy begins. If I recall, the lines were, 'When the child comes of age, she will venture forth to remind the world of the truth it has tried so hard to forget, that the heavens' order has no place in terror. The age of heaven will end, and so will rise the age of mortals. Many will call her existence a nightmare. But she is no dream. She is waking. Chapter 7. The Ambush. Angelina sat on a nearby stump as she let out a sigh. She looked around at the rest of her party as she nervously tapped her feet on the grass below. She didn't like this contract. It was a contract given especially to them. The price was honestly insane. The reward for completion was 4 platinum coins. Normally, tough extermination jobs gave at most 200 gold coins. This sky-high price was honestly also a point of concern for Angelina. Ever since she investigated the attacked wagon a few days ago, she had this bad feeling in her gut about this whole thing. The attack site made her skin crawl, as if her body knew whatever did, this is dangerous beyond compare. What's worse is that they just got news that silver-ranked adventurer teams have gone missing after searching a mere 500 meters into the forest. Now here she was with her party a good 5 kilometers deep into the forest. The reports from the other returning teams were right. This forest was dead. She sensed nothing throughout the entire trip except for the odd bird or two. Usually this forest would have signs of life, wolves howling, bushes rustling as creatures rushed to get out of the way, the roars of distant monsters, but now, nothing. Nothing but the rustling of leaves in the wind. If they got back safe and sound like this, it would be the easiest job of her life. Basically take a 8-kilometer hike and get paid a fortune. Problem is, if something went wrong, this will be the last hike she and friends will ever take. I don't like this, Angelina muttered. Yeah, I know what you mean, Jerry, the team's rogue, said as he fidgeted with one of his daggers. Whatever that thing is, it's wiped out an entire silver rank team. Philly, the team's priest, said shakily. Yeah, Angelina replied with a grimace. The ranks of the adventurers signaled a significant increase in power. Gold ranks were nothing like silver ranks. The differing ranks were there to allocate what classes of monsters the adventurers may hunt. Iron ranks can deal with things like wolves and goblins. A gold-ranked team like the one Angelina was in are allowed to take contracts to deal with some of the most dangerous common monsters. Basilisks, undead lichs, gorgons, mountain trolls, elder spriggans, and many more. The higher ranks of mithril and hero are extremely rare. The members of those teams are a cut above the rest by a wide margin. Mithril-ranked adventurers are also called dragon slayers by other adventurers, because only mithril-ranked adventurers and above are permitted to hunt the powerful draconic creatures. A silver-rank adventurer is small fry as compared to Angelina, but in nature, the different ranks are like a pecking order. Angelina may be above a silver rank, but what rank is this new monster? If the monster is a mithril or hero-class monster, then Angelina and her team will get slaughtered. The worst thing about this current situation is that even if the monster is a gold rank, they don't know what it can do. A surprise attack is worth 10 expected ones. Humanoids are squishy, weak creatures. One wrong move and you lose a limb, or your head. The lack of information, perhaps, was the most pressing problem. It's difficult to fight a monster you know nothing about. Every page in the adventurer bestiary is written in blood. Information brought back after dead adventurers gave their lives to recover that information. Humans fight monsters by preparing or knowing what the monster can do. If the adventurers have no idea what the monster can do, then the chances of victory drop drastically. How long do you think that guy is going to take? Gregor grumbled as he continued to scan to the edges of the clearing they were sitting in. Do know he's been gone almost an hour. He said he'll be back by nightfall. Unless that thing gets him first, Jerry replied. That's not funny, Philly replied shakily. Sorry, Jerry muttered apologetically. We're a little on edge, but let's try to keep cool, Gregor said. This contract was an escort contract. Angelina's team was supposed to escort this strange man to this clearing, then wait for him to go somewhere and escort him back. Honestly, this whole thing smelled shady. They had no idea who he is, why he's here, and why it's so important that the pay is 4 fucking platinum coins. Then Angelina heard the rustling of bushes. She shot to her feet and drew her bow, pointing it in the direction of the sound. What? Gregor said as the party all got into battle formation. I heard something, Angelina muttered in reply as she scanned the tree line. Then she saw the branches shift slightly and again the rustling sound, this time slightly to the left. There's something here, Angelina said. Oh shit, Jerry said as he raised his daggers. Then again the sound of the trees rustling, this time behind them. Angelina whirled and pointed her bow in the direction of the sound. Then again the bushes rustled again from the front. "Shit, they're all around us," Angelina said shakily. "That bestiarian said there was likely more than one," Feely replied. "Yeah, a mother and kid," Gregor said through gritted teeth. Now the party was back to back, each scanning a sector of the tree line. Then Angelina spotted an entire tree shake. "Shit, it's big. I just saw something bump into a tree," Angelina said. Fuck, Jerry said, his voice going up a pitch. "Calm down. It might not even be that new monster," Gregor said, trying to keep anyone calm. Angelina then suddenly spotted something big and white in the trees. The monster stilled for a moment, then charged out of the trees. "It's charging," Gregor said as the party all turned to face the charging beast. Angelina drew her bow and took in the sight of this terrifying beast. It was completely white, with a domed head, no eyes or nostrils, just a smooth surface. Its mouth was a gnashing maw of serrated teeth. From its shoulder protruded spines which Angelina recognized as the same spines that were found at the attack site. Its lower half was that of a serpent, and its torso was vaguely humanoid, with 4 arms. The upper 2, which happened to be the larger arms, were tipped with blades. The worst part is perhaps the fact that it's almost 3.5 meters tall, with jaws that look like they can swallow a man whole. "Seeking shot," Angelina intoned, and a glowing blue arrow shot out that began homing in on the beast. The beast slithered to the side and ducked downwards at an angle, the arrow flying over its body. Seeking shot always prioritizes the center of mass, which means the arrow came down on the beast at an angle, giving it an easy way to dodge. "Rune cage," Morgs the mage said, and 2 blue magic circles appeared above and below the beast, binding it with magic. The beast roared, and with a twist of its body it tore free from the spell. "Conflagration," Morgs cried as a rune appeared below the beast. Unfortunately, the beast dodged to the side, and the pillar of flame that appeared hit air. The beast roared as it continued to rapidly close the distance. "Barrier of the Faithful," Philly shouted, and White Shield appeared in front of the party. "Pinning shot," Angelina said, as she fired a pair of arrows at the beast's snake-like bottom half. "Banner of Valor," Stalwart Aegis. Gregor roared as he stepped forward to meet the charge. The beast smashed through the filly's barrier, but lost most of its power, and the strike was stopped by Gregor's enhanced shield. Angelina's arrows struck home, and the chains appeared between the arrows and binded the beast's lower half. The beast roared as it tried to break free. "Assassinate," Jerry said as he vanished in a puff of smoke and reappeared behind the beast, high up in the air. His daggers glowing, and delivered a devastating slash on the beast's back. Then, the beast's form shattered in motes of light. "What?" Jerry asked as he looked around at the scattering motes of light. "It looks like a Spriggan's decoy," Morgs began. Then Angelina heard Morgs and Feely gasp. The party turned around to see a pair of black-taloned hands materialize around Philly and Morgs. Angelina's eyes widened in horror as the form of the monster appeared before her eyes. She could see it was more open, and it looked like it was smiling. Then, with a scream, each Philly and Morgs were dragged into the forest. Angelina fired an arrow into the forest in panic, but she doubts she hit anything. "Fuck, Philly!" Jerry screamed as he dashed towards the trees, only for Gregor to grab him by the arm. All the while, Angelina could hear Philly and Morgs screaming in the forest. "Stop! If you go in, you're dead too!" Gregor roared before Jerry could reply. The screams from Philly and Morgs reached a blood-curdling peak. Then, silence. "Fuck," Jerry said in horror. "We need to get out of here," Angelina said, her voice shaking as the deaths of the companions she had known for years began to sink in. "We can't. We need to kill this thing. If we run into the trees, this thing will pick us off one by one," Gregor said as through gritted teeth. Then from the forest, Angelina saw a long object being thrown out from the forest. The 3 remaining people in the party all tensed as they expected an attack. But nothing happened. When Angelina took a closer look at the object, she felt her blood turn to ice. Lying in the grass was Philly's arm. It looks like the arm was just pulled right off her body. Jerry's eyes widened as he looked at the arm, and Angelina sensed something snap in him. Angelina knew the 2 of them were always close. They made for an odd pair. the pure priest and the dashing rogue. Definitely the kind of couple you would find a novel, but sadly reality had other plans. She always suspected there was something going on between them, but she never thought she would get the confirmation in the way she was about to witness. Jerry howled like a wounded animal and charged straight into the forest before Angelina and Gregor could stop him. Angelina heard him shout, and there was a slight rustling in the trees. Then silence. This time something else flew out from the forest. Angelina looked down expecting the worst and felt a lump in her throat as she looked down at Jerry's decapitated head. Then all was quiet except for the slight rustling of trees around them. She could hear them moving. So far they've only seen the mother, who knows where the child is hiding. "It's fucking with us," Gregor said through gritted teeth as Angelina stood with her back to his, scanning the tree line. "We aren't going home, are we?" Angelina said shakily. "We will, we just need to stay focused." Gregor said his will was still strong and undefeated. Again she heard movement from the same two places as the first attack, each at opposite ends of the clearing. "Is it going to try the same thing again?" Angelina asked. "Probably. I'll block the front and keep an eye on the rear." "Don't get carried off," Gregor replied. Sure enough, Angelina saw the beast emerge from the old location. It behaved almost exactly like the first decoy. Well, that ability looks like a Spriggan decoy. Decoy abilities like this create illusions that mimic the original creature to a certain degree. These illusions are usually extremely aggressive, designed to tie down the enemy, buying time for the real body to attack or escape. Seeing this, Angelina turned her gaze to the rear and kept an eye out on the tree line. Then she saw the grass get crushed at the tree line. The beast was moving in, and it was invisible just like before. Angelina kept track of it in the corner of her eye, trying not to let it know she knows where it is. Then, when she was sure she could get a good shot. "Pinning shot," Angelina cried, and her arrows latched onto the beast's serpent like lower half. The beast materialized from invisibility and roared. "Wyvern strike." Angelina roared and fired off her strongest attack. A red searing arrow that deals fire damage. The problem was the projectile was slow, but with the beast immobilized, Angelina's aim was true. The red arrow smashed right into the beast's chest. The beast staggered back and exploded into motes of light. "What?" Angelina sputtered. Then she felt a thud in the earth along with a gurgle. Angelina spun around in panic and saw Gregor impaled on the ground. The beast's blade went clean through his shield and into his chest. "You really thought that I would use the same trick twice," the beast said with a small laugh. Angelina raised her bow, intending to fire another arrow, but she saw a white blur, then a searing pain in the hand that was holding the bow. She looked at her hand and saw that the beast had cut her bow in half and took off a few of her fingers with the slash. She grit her teeth and felt panic start to rise in her chest. "Good try, but not good enough," the beast said with a laugh as it ripped the blade from Gregor's chest. "You can talk," Angelina replied shakily as she kept an eye on Gregor. He was fumbling with his belt looking for a healing potion. Angelina knew Gregor keeps an emergency full heal potion on his person. It could heal almost any wound. It cost him a fortune, but he felt it was a good investment at the time. If he can drink that potion, he might be able to land a good hit on the monster, potentially wounding it enough that it had to retreat. "Yes, I can," the beast said with a smile in his voice as he raised a blade and slammed it right into Gregor's face, killing him instantly. "Trying to heal?" the beast said sarcastically as it laughed and pulled the blade free. This was the last straw for Angelina. She let out a sob and screamed. She turned and tried to run. She got 2 steps forward when she felt a hand close around her. "Where do you think you're going?" Angelina heard the beast say as she was brought up to its face. Angelina could now see every horrifying detail of the beast. Its maw filled with rows upon rows of serrated teeth. Its face is smooth and white, with no eyes or nostrils. Angelina, now petrified with fear, felt a moist warmth between her legs as she wet herself. She could smell its breath, and it reeked of blood. Then she saw something that reminded her of her fate. She saw a fragment of the sky-blue cloth that Philly wore stuck in its teeth. It's over. Her dreams of starting her own little bakery, once she's earned enough money, are now moot. They never should have accepted his job, The only small comfort to her was that the bastard that sent them here would not get what he wanted. That pawn of his that walked off would soon be next. He will soon join her in the next life. Why haven't you killed me? Angelina wept as she lowered her head. Then she heard the beast laugh, and she raised her head slightly to see the beast's maw widen slightly as if to smile. Because I have some questions for you first. If you want a quick, painless death, I suggest you answer. Chapter 8. The Cradle. As I swallowed the body of the archer, I was rather disappointed. It turns out she knew nothing of that strange magic dome further ahead. I have been tracking this party for hours. They were the first gold-rank adventurer team I have fought. Although I still sensed danger from them, it wasn't as bad as it was on the first day. I could tell that they still could kill me, but I could kill them too. My next move will be to go looking for that other man that went ahead. These past few days have been eventful, to say the least. I got a few new essences after hunting in the forest. I finished the horned bear essence, which had this weird name attached to it. It improved my muscle density and improved my bone strength, which also improved the strength of my spines. The really interesting one was the Spriggan essence I got from these strange tree people. It gave me the ability to move through the forest without leaving any tracks at all. My body seemed to pass through the branches, and the grass would stand back up the moment I went over it. I could turn this off whenever I wanted, which I did earlier to let the adventurers know where I was to freak them out. The Spriggan essence also gave something very interesting. It gave me this ability called Spriggan Decoy. It essentially makes a copy of myself that I can direct to an extent. It's basically an illusion. Its attack was much weaker, and if it takes any form of damage, it disappears. Still, it was useful for a distraction. I just had to make the decoy avoid getting hit and draw my prey's attention long enough to sneak up on them. There was a glaring problem, however. Mages could apparently cast a spell to tell which one is real me. I learnt this the hard way when I ambushed a silver-ranked team 2 days ago. I found the most problematic individuals to fight were mages due to their spells being able to lock me down, giving the rest of the adventurers an opening to attack. The mages also looked to have powerful offensive abilities, but these were so slow I could easily dodge them. That was why I used the decoy, so I could take out their healer and the mage first. If I left the healers there, any non-fatal attacks would be quickly undone through healing. That and their defensive spells made them very problematic to fight. So when I came up with a plan to kill these ones, I made sure I took those two out first. There is another reason I took out the healer first. After stalking this group for a while, I noticed that the priest and rogue were behaving strangely towards each other. More interestingly, I could sense the priest and rogue were giving off strange scents when they were together. I figured out it was some kind of mating pheromone, which means the rogue would be really upset if I took out the healer. Something I found out after dealing with a bronze-ranked team was that humans were extremely emotional creatures. I never noticed it much in my past life, but now with my new body, I have a fresh perspective on the emotional tendencies of humans. Make a human mad and they would do something stupid. That bronze-rank team had this idiot who was threatening me even as I had him in my hand and about to bite him in half. He was bragging to me about how there was this mithril-ranked team that would hunt me down and kill me and make me suffer, put me down like the beast I am, blah blah blah. The interesting thing about that little spiel of his was that he said the mithril team in Avalon. I know there's a higher rank of adventurers being the hero rank. So if he wanted to scare me, why use the second best rank? Unless that's the best rank that City has available, not only that the word "the" implies there's only one available. Still, that made them dangerous. I noticed there is a significant spike in power between the ranks. Honestly, if I hadn't strategized beforehand and I just ran into these guys, I would probably have been injured at the very least. I most likely wouldn't have been able to take them all out. I had to make sure the terrain was favorable. I needed to figure out which targets to take out first, and I had to use psychological tricks to get the rogue to basically commit suicide. Lastly, I needed to use tricks to get them to defend the wrong direction. Yet overall, this was well worth the trouble. I was right, the stronger humans were worth much more than their weaker counterparts. I'm already at human genome stage 6, and I could tell I am much smarter now. My memory is almost picture perfect. I can replay scenes in my head and remember events very clearly. I could memorize the path through the forest, and I found I could instinctively predict the actions of the humans I faced just by looking at the way their body moved, their movements telegraphing their actions to me. As for my conscience, I figured out what was the problem. My mind is obsessed with one thing: survival. If I kill an innocent person that would pose no threat to me and provide no benefit, then I would feel bad. But if something wants to kill me, and if letting them go puts me in danger, then I have no moral compunctions about killing them. Like that girl from earlier, she had no way to know what I was. All she would know is that the camp got destroyed. Also, if my prey is powerful and they would give me great benefit, then I would also have no pity for them. It seems no matter how intelligent I become, or how human I become, this overriding internal programming for survival will still supersede all other inclinations. Yes, the humans figured out really quickly that there's some new creature prowling the forest, but they obviously have no idea what I am. After all, sending scouts into the forest to gather information is a good idea, unless the scouts you lose end up making your enemy stronger. If they just sent in a bunch of gold-ranked teams into the forest from the start, I would most likely have to flee this forest and go somewhere else. But now, after sending meal after meal to me on a silver plate, I can deal with gold-ranked adventurers now. I just needed to get strong enough to kill that mithril team. After that, there is nothing in this forest that can contest my power. Well, I may get a power-up soon. That magic dome looked very interesting. Something in there is important, and if I can use whatever is in there, then who knows how much that will power me up. With that thought in mind and a smile on my face, I reactivated my invisibility and forest walking ability. I headed deeper into the forest, following the trail of the human that left the group. I left him alone because I was hoping he would have some insight into how to get into that dome. I tried touching it earlier, and I ended up getting nasty shock from it. So I need to figure out how to get in. I followed the trail of the man, and to my delight I saw the trail led towards that strange magic dome. When I reached the edge of the tree line, and I once again beheld the massive magic dome. It was translucent and blue, crackling with energy. On the inside of the dome was what looked to be a mansion. This time I saw a woman standing inside. She had red hair, pale skin, and ruby-like eyes. The man was on the outside speaking to her. I focused my senses on them and began to eavesdrop. "Save your false courtesy, whelp. Is my father too cowardly to even face me now?" The woman spat in contempt. "There has been a complication, princess. He wished to be here, but the circumstances did not allow it." The man replied courteously, "So he is a coward. He can lock me in here, but he doesn't have the courage to see it through." The woman hissed in response, "The circumstances are severe, princess." The man replied with another, "Then what are these circumstances then? The prophecy is supposed to commence in under an hour, and he isn't even here." "Is he really so confident in this little cage?" the woman said coldly. "Under an hour? Princess, midnight has passed. You are of age now," the man said quizzically. "Fool, did you think I was born when the clock struck midnight? I will be truly a woman in under an hour, and if the prophecy comes to pass, you will be right here to see it happen," the woman said with a cold smile. I sensed the man fidget slightly at her words. I could smell his fear. Something about this whole situation terrified him. "Out with it. What are the circumstances?" the woman demanded. "A new monster has appeared, princess. It is dangerous, and we know next to nothing about it. That is why your father could not risk coming here," the man said apologetically. "A monster, you say? Now that is interesting," the woman said with a sly smile. The man paused at her reaction. "When I came here earlier, I didn't see her or sense her. To be fair, I couldn't sense anything beyond this barrier. My best guess was that this barrier sealed off everything on the other side. You see, whelp, yesterday something interesting happened. Something tried to break in," the woman said with a smile. "What?" the man stammered in reply as he turned and looked around. "Oh yes, you are not as alone as you think, fool," the woman said as she placed her hands on the barrier. The barrier crackled, and I could see blue arcs of electricity course up her body, singing her flesh and destroying bits of her dress. "Princess, what are you doing?" the man stammered as he took a step back in shock. "You think this cage can hold me forever? One day I will be free, and all of you will know my wrath," the woman screamed, as she withdrew her arms and her eyes glowed blue. Elbow-length gloves made of swirling runes covered her arms. She thrust her arms at the barrier and began to pry it apart. A hole began to appear and the barrier crackled, and arcs of energy flew out, scorching the ground. Her dress was now a mess of burned fabric, and I could see burns all over her body. Then, with a loud bang, the hole in the barrier slammed shut and threw her onto her back. "When I get out, I will take back my birthright, and I will repay this injustice 1,000 times over," the woman said as he panted and stood up shakily. "How?" the man said shakily. "Don't you know? I'm the most talented mage the Academy has ever seen. My Lord Father, the fool that he is, took pity on me and gave me arcane books for my leisure. I have been making a spell that would allow me to escape. It is still incomplete, but soon I will be free," the woman said as she shifted her gaze up and looked straight at me. She could see me. Well, the mages could also see me when invisible, but they had to activate a spell to do so. I eventually figured out it would be best to kill the mages first. After all, why would they even know to look for me out of the blue? "Why are you telling me this?" the man said as he looked around again. I could tell he was starting to figure out something was very wrong. "Because I don't expect you to see dawn," the woman said with a twisted smile, and I saw her eyes were consumed by madness and hate. Well, the jig is up. Might as well have a chat with this woman. With that thought in mind, I began moving closer to the pair. I saw the woman's eyes widened as she saw me approach. The man, still oblivious to my presence, started to realize the woman was not in fact looking longingly at the freedom on the outside of the barrier, but was in fact looking at me. The man's body twitched as the woman's gaze shifted upwards to look up at me. The man turned and I materialized in front of him. His face went pale and I snatched him up in one of my arms. He screamed in fear as I held him in hands. "There is no need for him. If you want to know how to get me out, I can tell you. If you want to know anything else, I can tell you more than he ever can. He is a pawn, a disposable piece on the board. Why do you think he was sent here on this suicide mission?" the woman said with a smile. What she said made sense. And the funny thing about my body is that I can sense when someone is lying. I can pick up all the bodily functions that occur when someone lies, and as far as I can tell, this woman is telling the truth. As I looked down at the screaming man in my hand, he didn't look like the "I'm going to threaten you and give you information without knowing it" type. He seems more of the scream and piss himself until he passes out type. Sure enough, after a solid minute of non-stop screaming, his eyes rolled up and he passed out in my hand. "He even smells like a coward," I mutter as I flip him upside down and give him a shake to see if he wakes up. "I think that's urine, my friend," the woman said calmly. I lifted my hand and I saw some yellow liquid dripping down from the bottom of my hand. "Well, that's disgusting," I mutter as I drop the man on the ground before burying a blade into the back of his head. Well, I have no intention of sitting around and waiting for him to wake up. "So I assume you want to talk?" I say as I turn my head to look at the smiling woman. "Why, yes, I do," the woman replied. She didn't seem at all bothered by the burns all over her arms. "Who are you? Why are you in there?" I asked as I peered at the woman. "I am Cecilia Avalon, Crown Princess of the city-state of Avalon," the woman said as she did a graceful curtsy. "As for why I am in here, well, you see, there is this prophecy that predicted that I would destroy the precious order of this world." Cecilia replied. "Prophecy?" I asked. "Yes, a prophecy. You see, this world of terror is inhabited by the mortal races, but we are ruled by heaven. The seraphim and their divine council hold sway over this world. They tell us how to live, how to behave. Anything that goes against this order that they have set is considered heresy. The feeble-minded sheep in this world view the seraphim as gods, but I know they are not. Gods cannot be killed, and I assure you, my friend, the seraphim can most definitely be killed," the woman said. "Tell me about heaven," I ask as I realize this woman might be a wealth of information. If I could get her to tell me everything, I would be much more informed on the workings of this world. "Would you like to bargain, friend?" Cecilia asked. "You want me to let you out, and if I do, you'll tell me whatever I want to know." I state the train of thought is honestly quite obvious. The thing is, if I let her go and she goes back to that city, she might tell everyone about me. Don't worry, friend, I won't tell a soul about who and what you are. Although first, may I request you entertain a little question of mine? What are you? The woman asked curiously. If I tell you what I am, I'll have to kill you, I reply with a laugh. Oh, now that is interesting. You know your blades look very familiar. That and the way you materialized from invisibility. Did you know, friend, that different species have different kinds of invisibility and the way they rematerialize is different? When I look at your blades and the way you exit invisibility, it reminds me of something, a stalker chameleon. The woman said with a smile, and I felt a chill go down my spine. This woman was smart. A little too smart. You are mimicking the abilities of another creature, and I know only of one species that can do that. Are you a primordial devourer? Cecilia asked as her smile widened. I stood in silence as I saw the mirth in her eyes. I could tell she had her answer from my silence alone. I guess you'll have to kill me now. Come and get me, the woman said with a laugh. I growl as I look at the massive barrier. I know I can't break through this thing. Now then, back to my proposition. I would like to make you an offer. Free me and help me take back my rightful throne. In exchange, I will give you something only I can give. Protection, Cecilia said. Protection? How exactly are you going to protect me? I asked as I lowered my head closer to her. If anyone finds out you are a devourer, the news will go straight to heaven. Then you will have to deal with the seraphim. Let me tell you, friend, you will one day be able to defeat the angels, but not as you are now. If the forces of heaven find you as you are now, you will be turned to ash, the woman said. I'm starting to see where this is going. So if I help you do all of that, you will carve out a place for me to live. You will keep my existence a secret. If someone finds out for me, you will silence them. Is that your offer? I ask. Exactly, Cecilia replied. My only problem with your proposal is that in that situation you could threaten to report me to heaven. You will have me on a leash, I say with a growl. Of course not. I could report you in that situation. If I have a death wish, that is. Do you know why I'm locked away all the way out here? Cecilia asked. Why? I asked as I brought my head an inch away from the barrier. Because that prophecy was made by a great seer. The seer once served the divine council. The seer appeared on the day of my birth and told my father the prophecy. She told him that this would be her last prophecy, and she was right. My father killed her to keep the secret. You see, friend, I was always different, too smart for my own good, too magically powerful for my own good. My parents saw all of my potential, and instead of being proud, they grew to fear me. My whole life I lived in the shadow of that prophecy. So they isolated me from the rest of the world. They called me sickly to the court. They said I couldn't leave bed most days. Back then I was just a girl. I listened to my parents who told me of the dangers of the outside world. But as I grew older, I saw my siblings free and happy, while I alone remained sealed in my room. Then, as I had my first blood, I found out that I preferred women to men. After that, I met a servant girl. She was pretty, and I grew to care for her, and so she did for me as well. One day we decided to escape together, to go somewhere far away. No prophecy, no judgments, Cecilia said as she lowered her head, and I could sense a deep sorrow start to leak out of her. We failed. In the end, they tortured her, and she revealed how we loved each other, how we laid with each other. Cecilia said, then her voice started to change to one of anger. To heaven, a man must never lay with another man, and a woman must never lay with another woman. Unnatural, they called it. Cecilia spat as I saw her eyes once again filled with hate and rage. So they hung her, and then they sent me here. Away from everything. 4 years I rotted in this prison. 4 years I waited here alone as a bird in a cage, and I have had 4 years to learn to hate everyone that wronged me. Cecilia said as she once again reached forward to grasp the cage as the cage crackled at the touch. If I am free, I will not betray you. We are both monsters, friend. I just happen to be born with human skin. All in creation despise the likes of us. I intend to carve out a life for myself, and I could use some help. I have no loyalty, no love for any of my kind. What I want is for heaven to fall. I will shatter their precious order. I will break this cage they call a world. Help me, and you will be my ally, my friend. I will do everything in my power to help you, maps to better hunting grounds. I can tell you where to find the likes of phoenixes, dragons, mountain trolls. Your power will soar until even the heavens can no longer challenge you. What do you say? Friend, Cecilia said. Throughout this entire thing, she hasn't lied once, and I know that she means every word that comes out of her mouth. Even if she's a liar, I did hear from another source that other races exterminated the Devourers. So chances are she's right. It's only a matter of time before I mess up and someone finds me. If I had help from an entire nation, a knowing collaborator with power, that improves my chances significantly. So with that thought in my mind, I made my reply. Take your hands off the barrier, friend, and I will need you fully functional when I get you out of there. Chapter 9. New Partner. Cecilia summoned another magic glove. This time it covered her right arm up to her shoulder. She took a deep breath and thrust her hand at the barrier. She pushed and pushed. Eventually her arm left the barrier. I could see her face scrunched up as sweat poured down her face from the exertion. When she got her hand through, she snapped her fingers and the barrier blew her back. However, when she snapped her fingers, a blue ball appeared. The blue ball hovered for a moment before splitting into 4, and they flew off in different directions. Moments later, I saw blue trails appearing from the surrounding forests. These lead to the ceiling crystals. Destroy them and I am free, Cecilia said as she stood back up. You've been preparing, I say as I look at the trials. Of course, what else is a girl to do when she is locked in a cage if not to plan her escape? Cecilia said with a sly smile. You expected to have someone help you escape? I asked as I turned to face her. It is one of the many possibilities. I prepared for them all. Now go, friend. These crystals should be a nice snack for you. Consider them a gift for the start of a fruitful partnership, Cecilia said. I don't think I can eat rocks. I replied with a laugh. My friend, you are a devourer. You can eat anything, Cecilia said with a smile. Let's see if that's true. I replied with a smile of my own as I began following one of the trails. The first trail didn't go far. It led to an unassuming shrub. My senses didn't pick up anything from the bush. My senses could usually pick up almost anything. I could see that magic dome even through all the trees. It glowed like the sun as far as my senses are concerned. Strangely, in the back of my mind, something was telling me that there was nothing here, that I had been lied to, and I should leave this place never to return. Odd, why would I think that? Could it perhaps be some form of magic protecting the crystal? I reached forward, and the moment I touched the shrub, it seemed to flicker like an image. Then the shrub disappeared, revealing a glowing blue crystal that shone like the sun in my eyes. It shone brighter than any heart I have ever seen. My mind was immediately assaulted with thoughts of leaving and never returning. Honestly, it was an extremely smart defense mechanism. Just hide it in plain sight and make the crystal tell people to leave through mental suggestion. There was only one problem with this system. It didn't account for me, or more accurately, my hunger. The thought of eating this crystal and my hunger for it completely drowned out the mental suggestions. As I looked at the crystal, I instinctively knew what to do. I opened my maw and I felt something inside me awaken. I took a deep breath and inhaled. I felt the power drain out of the crystal. I saw blue trails of energy drain out of the crystal into my waiting jaws. I felt the power flood in. This was easily several times more power than the gold-ranked team I just ate. As I looked back at the crystal, I saw it was now just a dull white sitting silently in its pedestal. When the power was empty, I felt the familiar feeling of my body changing. Core evolution achieved stage 3. Information assimilation acquired. Essence obtained can now transfer memories. Regeneration acquired. Wounds will now heal at a greatly increased rate. Now this is very interesting. So it looks like I can now steal the memories of those I eat, and my wounds now heal rapidly. I just got a lot more dangerous. I laughed as I turned back around and returned to the dome. When I got back, I saw Cecilia staring at the dome, which was now much dimmer. You did it, Cecilia said in disbelief. 3 more, I replied with a smile. There's one more in here, a control crystal. There's a barrier around it to stop me from tampering with it. But I think if you destroy the other 3, that barrier will fail as well. Then you can devour that one as well, Cecilia said as her eyes filled with a happiness that bordered on madness. Sounds good, hang tight, I say as I turn away and head off the deal with the other crystals. Each crystal was more or less the same story. Each time I felt my power swell. Those fools from Avalon have no idea what they have done. Unfortunately, there were no more evolutions, but maybe with the big one inside the mansion, it would be a different story. When I got back to the mansion, I saw that the barrier was gone. Cecilia was just standing there looking around her as if in shock. It was then that I noticed this woman was rather powerful. If I met her before I ate those crystals, she might have been able to kill me easily. But now it's an even fight. Still, our deal stands. I need to think of the long term. I can't just roam around eating anything that crosses my path forever. If what she said was true, then I need to power up before heaven finds me. I can basically assume that as far as any of the races are concerned, my race is killed on sight. So yeah, an ally is going to be hard to find, not really wise to turn one down at this stage. When I got close to her, I saw she had walked over to a nearby table and chair that was sitting out in the open. She picked up what looked to be a clock that was sitting on the table. I could see her smile widen as she gazed down at the clock. Right on schedule. Fate is truly never tardy, Cecilia said as she looked up at me with a wide smile on her face. Thank you, friend. I will repay this kindness tenfold, Cecilia said as she looked at where the barrier used to be. For years I remained a caged bird. Now at last I'm free, Cecilia said in a tone that implied she could barely believe it. What now? I asked as my words snapped her back to reality. Yes, of course. First I need to pack up my possessions, Cecilia said. Won't that take a while? I asked, slightly surprised at that statement. That's what magic is for friend. Do not worry, it won't take long. In the meantime, let me show you the control crystal. You can enjoy your prize while I pack, Cecilia said as she beckoned me to follow. And your wounds? I assume you have means to heal them. I ask as I look down at Cecilia. I remember burns can get horribly infected from my experience back in my past life. I don't want her getting an infection and dying. The last thing I need is for the death of a princess to be pinned on me. Well, they will pin it on me at first regardless, but without her there would be no one to correct that fact. If she dies, there goes my safe haven. Cecilia paused at those words and she looked down at her burnt and blistered hands. She seemed a little shaken by my words and her hands glowed for a moment. Her wounds were then covered in a gold light as the wounds faded. Thank you, friend, Cecilia replied softly as she turned around to face me, her eyes soft. I am confused. What's with this reaction? If I was some dashing knight of at least roughly the same type of creature, like an elf or something, you could say there was some romantic intention there. But I'm a giant man-eating serpent thing, so it can't be that. Ah, whatever. I'll deal with this later. It'll probably make sense if I let things play out. As I got to the door, I shrunk my body down to the smallest I could make it, which is now about 3 meters. Still pretty big, considering my full body length is about double my standing height, thanks to my snake lower half. Still, my body was rather slender, and I still managed to slip through the narrow doorway, although I did break the door hinge. I followed Cecilia through the mansion, breaking half the things I came across by accident: vases, statues, paintings. Cecilia didn't seem to care. I guess this is just a very well-furnished prison to her. Considering she is a princess, her captors probably tried their best to make her life as comfortable as possible here. Eventually, we arrived at a large room, and I could see the same type of crystal sitting in the middle. This one was almost double the size, and it looked absolutely delicious. I was right, the barrier is gone. This crystal is just the command crystal, it has no barrier runes, Cecilia said as she stared at the crystal. Do you want to study it first? Or can I just go ahead? I asked. I may really want to eat it, but if Cecilia can get some insight from it, then I could wait. No, it's exactly what I expected. I just never got the chance to confirm my suspicions, Cecilia said dismissively as she turned away from the crystal. Suspicions? I asked as I looked down at her. Why, yes, dear friend. I deduced a single crystal of this size cannot sustain such a barrier. So there must be external crystals powering it. The other crystals you ate gave it power. This crystal gave that power form and function. It is just a storage of information, commanding the ether into a usable form, Cecilia explained. You are quite good at magic, I replied. I can teach you when we have the time. I can only imagine the kind of spells your body can weave. There were spell-casting devourers in the old legends. They could use spells that could raise cities to ash. I look forward to seeing how powerful you can be, Cecilia said. Why would you help me learn magic? I asked, confused. Why would someone give up a source of their power? It would only serve to weaken your position of power. Now it would be an even fight. If she taught me magic, I would win easily. Because I know you will one day be more powerful than anything I could ever hope to be. A little magic, not going to tip the scales in my favor. That and you are now my only friend and ally. For years I stayed here. All I received from those of my own kind was fear, condescending speech, and mock courtesy. No one truly cared for what I wanted. You are the second living thing in my whole life who doesn't see me as a monster. It's tragic, isn't it? That I can only find companionship in a monster, Cecilia said, her voice cracking slightly. The second, I asked. The first is dead. She was hung, framed for killing me, Cecilia said as her eyes narrowed and watered. Well, I don't plan on dying anytime soon. So let's give this life our best shot, shall we? I say as I lean down to look at her. Are you comforting me? Cecilia asked with a small smile. Just some advice, one monster to another. I say with a smile. I suppose you are right. If my kind see me as a monster, then a monster I shall be. I shall wear their scorn as a badge of honor, Cecilia said as she reached her hand up and placed a gentle hand on the smooth front of my face. Go get packed, friend. We have much to do, I say, and she removes her hand. Yes, we do. Enjoy your meal, Cecilia said, now sounding much more determined. After Cecilia left the room, I looked at the crystal and I felt my mouth water. I opened my maw and I started draining the power from the crystal. I felt the ether within flow into me and I felt my power surge. After this, I again felt my body change. Core evolution achieved stage 4. Metabolic boost acquired. Movement and attack speed are now increased. Keratin plating acquired. Armored plates now available to provide improved defensive capabilities. Augmenting. Keratin plating has improved bone blades material strength. Greater bone blades now available. I looked down at my body and saw it was now covered in a layer of armored plates. The plates left small gaps so as not to restrict movement. I could see the places that weren't armored were what my body used to be. Those parts were still pretty tough. Your average human wouldn't be able to cut through my hide. Those adventurers, though, could definitely do so. I just somehow knew by looking at them. Now, however, let's see how effective their attacks are. I transformed one of my hands into a bone blade and saw the blades now had darker color and looked slightly different. The shape was also different. It now had a longer and curved edge. After I finished examining my new body, I walked out the door to see Cecilia walking down a set of stairs. I thought you were packing, I asked. As far as I could tell, she had only changed clothes and put on a small backpack. I did, Cecilia said as she reached into her backpack and pulled out a cube. Her hands glowed for a moment and blue light shot out from the cube. The light hit a spot of the ground and there materialized an entire bookshelf filled with books. That's handy, I say as Cecilia smiled and returned the bookshelf into the cube. It's my own invention. I made it in preparation for the day that I would leave, Cecilia said with a smile. Now I suppose we should find a place to stay. I don't mind if you are currently staying at a cave or some similar form of residence. As long as it is hidden and has shelter, I will be fine, Cecilia said. Oh, I know where to go. I think it'll be better than a cave, I say with a smile as I think back to the tomb where I was born. Oh? Cecilia asked as she tilted her head slightly at my statement. I laughed and I began moving towards the door. As I did so, I turned to look at her. You'll see what I mean. I think you'll like it, seeing as you seem to like magic so much. Chapter 10. Home Sweet Home. I cradled Cecilia in my arms as I sped through the forest, heading to where I have been staying for the past week or so. The journey on human legs would take days, but for me it took only about 3 hours. Judging from my estimation, I can move at about 40 km/h at full traveling speed. I couldn't achieve that speed in battle, of course. The rapid movement of battle and the momentum from my body made it so that I couldn't go this fast without risking falling over. As I sped through the forest, I could hear Cecilia laughing as the wind blew through her hair. I looked down, and I saw her face alight with pure, sincere happiness. I guess feeling the wind in your hair after being caged for years would be quite exhilarating. We soon arrived at the opening of the cave that led to the tomb where I was born. Here we are, home sweet home, I say as I stand at the opening of the cave. I'm sorry, I don't understand, Cecilia asked as she looked up at me. Don't worry, it's not as bad as it looks on the outside, I replied. I think you are seeing something I'm not, Cecilia said as she began looking around. Do you not see the cave entrance in front of you? I asked as I looked at the entrance right in front of me. No, Cecilia said as she casted a spell. Her eyes glowed for a moment. She looked around, and then she casted another spell, then another, then another. 4 spells later, she shook her head as she looked back at me. I put her down and reached forward towards the cave entrance. Please keep your hand there, Cecilia said as she walked over. She placed a hand on this barrier, and I saw a barrier flicker where she touched it. I'm not detecting any magic. It's a very well-hidden barrier. Feels like stone as well. This is a very well-crafted illusion. Or is it an illusion? Cecilia said as she touched the side of my hand that was supposedly inside this stone wall that she was seeing. The entry is seamless. It looks like your hand is phased into the stone, Cecilia muttered. Could it be? A manifestation? Cecilia asked. A what? I asked as I looked down at her. A manifestation is a more advanced form of illusion. Illusions are just creations of magic that mimic something, but they cannot fully mimic the properties of the original. Some are better than others in mimicry, but the copy is usually far inferior to the original. Manifestations are almost perfect copies with additional properties. They are a piece of a new constructed reality, much more complex to cast and execute. If this is truly a manifestation, it should have the same properties of stone, with the added ability to allow a select type of individual to enter, Cecilia explained. Do you have any idea if you can go in? I asked. This is awfully inconvenient. I am not sure. Manifestations or ancient lost magic. The last recorded use of it was in the Elysian Empire almost 5,000 years ago. The only manifestations that are found now are usually defense mechanisms held within old ruins. I suspect this is something similar, Cecilia said as she turned to face me. Yeah, there's this tomb on the other side, I replied. As I thought, if you are keyed for entry, perhaps try holding me close to you and go in, but go in backwards so I don't get crushed. Just release me if you feel me getting stuck on the barrier, Cecilia said. Okay, I'll go in slowly. Hopefully nothing happens. I reply as I pull Cecilia as close as possible to my body and turn around before slowly retreating back into the cave. Luckily for us, she went past the barrier easily. Well, that's good. I just got my first ally who can provide some semblance of a long-term plan. It would be really awkward if she just got squished here. Okay, we're in, I say as I look down at her. Yes, shall we proceed? Cecilia replied calmly. Can you see the other side of the barrier? I asked as I looked down at her. No, it's pitch black here. I assume for you some light is leaking in from the opening, Cecilia asked. Yeah, there's a lot of runes in the tomb. Maybe you can make some sense of them, I say as I began carrying her deeper into the cave, and finally we arrived at the door. The door was now much bigger. It was quite the shock, honestly, when I got back here after the first night. What was a bigger shock was that the room had changed to accommodate my larger size. This time when I entered, I saw it had done the same. The ceiling was now almost 8 meters tall, and the room was as wide as a basketball court. Along the walls, strange blue runes glowed. For me, that was more than enough light to navigate, but I have a feeling it'll be hard for Cecilia to see in there. Amazing, Cecilia said as she looked around at the runes around the room as I put her down. Cecilia snapped her fingers and a light appeared in her hand as she held it out to have a good look around the room. These runes, they are old, powerful. How did you find this place? Cecilia asked as she turned around to look at me. This is my home, I replied calmly. But that pawn said you appeared recently, Cecilia said. Some iron-ranked adventurers woke me up. They somehow got through the seals to this place. They made for a nice breakfast, though, I replied. I see. So you have slumbered here for who knows how long, Cecilia muttered as she looked around the room. Yeah, I've been here a while. Kind of, I said. Cecilia paused as she turned to look at me, confused by my odd reply. How old are you? Cecilia asked as she turned to face me. About a week old, I replied calmly, and I saw her eyes widen in shock. You are just a hatchling. I can see why it took every living creature in creation to ensure the extinction of the Devourers. I can only imagine how powerful you will be in a year, Cecilia said as she looked at me in awe. Well, that depends on my meals. I replied, this was another interesting thing about my new body. I knew instinctively that I don't grow per se, at least not in the sense of a human eating food and his body growing naturally over time. I eat things and I evolve. My growth is dependent on my food. No food, and I don't grow. Simple. Then I must get you the right food, growing boy that you are, Cecilia said with a sly smile. Let's get you settled in first, shall we? I said as I let out a small laugh. Honestly, I'm not going to lie, I kind of like Cecilia. Her odd, twisted personality seems to fit nicely with my slightly psychopathic one. Okay, maybe a little more than slightly. Yes, although these runes, I have a suspicion, Cecilia said as she walked over to a section of the wall that had this weird magic circle written on the wall. I think this is a control panel, Cecilia said as she gazed at the magic circle. What makes you say that? I asked as I gazed at the strange magic circle. The thing is, there were a lot of magic circles all around in the room. Some were on the floor, some on the walls, and there was this really big one on the ceiling. The one on the ceiling looked to be made of hundreds of small runes. What made this particular one special? Don't get me wrong, they all looked a little different. Maybe she could read some of these runes. I recognize some of these runes. This one is Axotl, when combined with these two, Regar and Wix. This combination is common in control crystals. I don't see this combination of runes anywhere in this room as far as I can tell. I can't really see the runes on the ceiling clearly, but it makes little sense to put a control panel there anyway. The creators of this place needed a way to test the magic of this place, Cecilia said as she ran her hand over the magic circle. Okay, but that's 3 out of the 20 or so runes there, I say as I gaze at the magic circle. Do you see how the runes are arranged? Linked in a triangle formation at the corners of the formation, Cecilia said as she ran finger along each line forming a triangle. Yeah, why? I replied, listening intently. When these runes are placed like this, it forms what is known as an interface control structure. All the other runes are merely command runes that run within the structure. The exterior runes also have the formation of signal nodes, which implies this formation is designed to send signals to other parts of this room, Cecilia said as she pointed at the edges of the formation. Okay, so do you know what to do? I asked. I might. Give me a moment, Cecilia said as she took out that cube from before, and from it she summoned an old tome. Cecilia then lifted the ball of the light into the air, leaving it floating. She then opened the tome and began to flip the pages, looking for something. I stood there quietly as she read from the book, occasionally looking up at the magic circle and looking back down at the tome. All the while she muttered to herself as her brow creased in concentration. For the next hour I just stood there as she muttered to herself and examined the magic circle. It's a variant, unstable though, Rail, Hex, Rast, Igni. But why in this arrangement? It's a stabilizer. But for what? The variance of the runes, their excess power, where does it go? Could it be? Yes it is. The flow of power is the formation. Fascinating. Finally she slammed the tome shut with a victorious smile on her face as she gazed at the magic circle. Figured it out? I asked. By now I was lying on the floor and just gazed at her in boredom. Yes, Cecilia said as she turned around and realized I was lying on the ground. Oh, how long did I take? Cecilia asked, a little embarrassed. About an hour, it's fine, I said as I rose back up to my standing height. Okay. I should be able to mark myself as allowed within this tomb's magic system, Cecilia said as she tapped at the magic circle. The runes spun and glowed, then suddenly they froze and began to glow brighter than before. Authorization required. I heard this voice ring out in the room. This seems a little sci-fi. I think you need to touch this circle, Cecilia said as she pointed at the magic circle that was now protruding from the wall and slowly spinning. Okay, I said as I reached forward and touched the circle. Immediately the room began to shake and I heard that voice rumble out. Authorization acknowledged. Adjusting parameters for human habitation. The voice said as I saw the room seemingly shift before my eyes. The stone floor started to shift and the walls began to move. This is the first time I have actually seen the room change. Previously, the room was always changed when I arrived. It was oddly hypnotic to see the dark stone walls shift and move like there was some great mechanism just beyond these walls. Amazing, the complexity required to create such a functionality. The only ancient ruins I have read about are old and dilapidated. None of the original internal systems were still functional. Cecilia said in awe as the room shifted. The room grew larger, and I saw what looked to be a room appear. Magic lights appeared in the room as the walls shifted and they popped out of the walls, illuminating the dark area. I saw an area of the floor open up, and I saw what looked to be a fountain appear. From it sprang clear, sparkling water, then a hearth with flames crackling within popped out of one of the walls. By the end of it all, this place looked much nicer, and it looked much more livable as well. Whoever designed this place knew what they were doing. I knew this place could change, but I didn't think it could change like this. Well, this looks much more hospitable, Cecilia said cheerily as she clapped her hands. Didn't expect this, I say as I look around the room. There's even a bath, Cecilia said in delight as she poked her head into the room that was formed. I went over to the door, and as I peered in, I saw a steaming pool of water. I watched as Cecilia began offloading whatever she packed into her magic cube. As far as I can tell, she brought everything in her personal bedroom. Soon the whole room was filled with her things. She had a lot of books. She had enough books to fill a small library. Good thing her personal room was rather large. Then she summoned out one last thing. From what I could see, it was a small gold locket. I saw her open it, and I started to sense sorrow from her as she gazed down at the locket. The sorrow slowly turned to anger, then anger became rage, and rage became wrath. I saw her eyes fill with hatred as she closed the locket with a snap, her lips curled into a snarl. If looks could kill, her expression would be a bomb. A bomb primed with explosives, waiting to explode and destroy everything at just the right moment. Then I heard her whisper under her breath as she gently put the locket onto one of the shelves. I will make them pay. I will make them suffer. I will have my vengeance.